Right, this is going to be the third episode of Banter Give and Go, because obviously the first one was the GOATs episode. That was actually a few weeks ago now. And then we did the last one, which was obviously the episode where it was like, we compared players to Counter-Strike players. By the way, even though like that is like a classic style for my YouTube channel, if people don't know, the main point of this show is just basketball. Like we won't actually do loads of references like that. Like you don't have, if you don't follow CSGO and you're from like League of Legends or something, you're really into the NBA, like more of my content there. Don't worry, we're not going to be like doing loads of CSGO references. I would say that's actually more, if anything, like if I would actually say, I'm thinking of that more as like the shorthand for me and you. Like if we're just talking now and we quickly want to make like a reference, we'll do that. We won't do it as much for fans. But what I thought I could do to set up how I think this episode should go is an interesting one, because obviously people will notice by the different tone and the theme of the last two, we're so far from the season still. Like the season's still so far from beginning. And then even then, like I said, we're not really going to do it like every week. We're going to start out super low down here and go, well, the first weeks, you know, this team's 2-1 in the power rank. We're not going to do that. We're going to keep it interesting, right? So I thought one way we could keep it interesting was we've come at this from slightly different angles, but I think we'll get to an interesting place in the middle. Because what I was thinking of was this. There's two things that I think are quite interesting, like historical contexts, but that we can apply to the modern day. So whereas a lot of the last episodes, like the first episode basically was really old school stuff, there was very few people, unsurprisingly, in the modern day active who were GOAT contenders for their position because they haven't finished playing yet. And then I would say the next episode was a lot more like modern day players, but let's say like just the last generation, I would say more like, because we were trying to get the best examples. So we're obviously picking people like Kevin Durant that are more like succinct than, like if you think of some of the players that have come along now, they're still really young in their careers who can get injured in 1 year and be irrelevant. So what I thought we could do that'll update the playbook, as it were, is this episode can give people a really good flavour of what we think of a lot of active players now, because there's a few different ways we can approach this one. One is, this is more the angle you've gone with, is I wanted us to do it where we pick out the players who are actually, like, essentially we sort the wheat from the chaff, to use the biblical analogy there, and find out who's actually good in this era. But you've done it more like literally picking a hard line of like people under 25 who are like going to be, I'm saying more, like I was thinking more in this sense, which is, like I said, because they've just updated that list recently. If people don't know, in like, I think it was like 96, they did that like 50 greatest NBA players. And then obviously like last year, they did this one where it was like the 75 now. And spoiler, if you can just understand the concept of math, they're going to do a 100 one. I'm going to guess in like 20 years or something, you know what I mean? Exactly.
Years, yeah.
And they're gonna, and the point is, this is a part that's very misunderstood about this list, is people don't know those lists, because they're essentially mainly about the media. They always are controversial. Like, I'll give you one that'll blow people's minds. When they made that list in 96, Maui, it's actually mental that Shaquille O'Neal's on their list. Like, he'd only played like fucking like 3 years in the NBA or something mad. Like, but the point of why they're doing it, kind of like how, because the reason I bring that up is because obviously everyone got outraged. Some of the names on this one, like for example, Anthony Davis was on this 75 one now. People like Russell Westbrook were. But you have to realize it's because either in the case of people like Shaq like that, it's like they've been so absurdly good now that they'd actually have to for real get struck down by the plague or killed / something go really wrong for them. Not like they're so good at the beginning. So I sort of get it. But the point I'm bringing up here is those aren't like Hall of Fames, because their careers aren't finished. Those lists are far from ironclad, and there are even some names that are egregious. Like, this is a Boomer reference, but I think the fact that Alex English has never made one of those lists is mental. People don't know he scored the most points in the 80s in the NBA. Like, that's pretty fucking good. I don't know if you know who played in the 1980s, boys, but it's a pretty fucking good year to play, decade to play basketball. So there's that angle we can go on, because I want to do it more towards that. Like, essentially, what I'm going to try and do with some of my names is, I'm going to have to make hard cuts for this, Maui. Like, some people can't make this 100. There's only going to be so many players available, and there's a million players, average 30 points a game a year now. So, if anything, it's going to get harder. And then I thought the other angle we could do is this. One of the areas, we might even do this in esports sometimes, mate, because I think this is another thing that's tortured. We should probably, no joke, go back and in esports do what we did in the last episode and do like role by role who the greatest players were. Because notice how much more interesting that was, that first episode we did, in terms of like, if we'd only made it about the GOAT debate, like I could force Karl Malone into a GOAT debate. It just wouldn't be that interesting for other people who don't care about it. And then secondly, because it's like the Zemu thing now, because we're only talking about how he's not Michael Jordan, it make him sound crap. Meanwhile, like I could talk for 3 hours about how mega some of those players are on that GOAT position list. But the point is, if you notice in Counter-Strike, we have the same problem they do in basketball and every other sport, Maui, which is there are certain positions are just inherently more about scoring / being the star / being built around. And essentially, those are just the positions you have to play to be the GOAT. And so I've always thought, I'll give you the obvious examples in Counter-Strike. Like, if I make a greatest players in Counter-Strike list, I can do it where I put on people like Dupree. It's just that you get into the same problems you do with an NBA list. Like, if I put Scottie Pippen on the same list as Michael Jordan and Kevin Durant, like, one of those three isn't the same, you know what I mean? Like, and one of them relies on another one. So, to me, essentially, to make it short, the problem I have with, like, a Counter-Strike list goes like this. Like, it's not like their following names aren't great players like Dupree or Zipnix or Carrigan. But if you're just doing a straight player list, they're probably none of them should really, you know what, maybe like Dupree can make it like 40th, if you know what I mean. But even then it's like, how do we divide up who the star was? And who
you need a support list or like an entry fragger list. Or
so basically, to me, the other thing I want to also do on this episode is figure out some of those people, because I do think that's a thing in the modern NBA that gets really lost in the narratives. People still just stat watch. Whereas to me, I am actually really interested in people like Jaylen Brown, etc. Like, he's clearly not the best player, but where does he fit in? And should he be considered a star? And should he make one of these lists one day? Or shouldn't? And where's the cutoff? So I think there's a lot of angles we can go with this. So give me one of your first names, because I thought another thing we can do on this one is, assuming these are all people we know, and it's not people that are too obscure, we'll do a mixture of like people we're picking out this, like there'll be an all-time great player, people that should just be the next best players the next few years. And I thought another thing we could do is, as we go through, let's also just do some other names that are in the active. Like, I'll give you a random one. We'll get to it in a minute. But I'm gonna ask you stuff like, what do you think of Paul George, for example? I think these are interesting cases. Like, they're never going to be the best player of the year, but they're again, if people, the problem I have, essentially, to get back to the gist of it, is I hate that we only ever criticize these people. Like, if you watch sports media, mate, you think Paul George was a bum. Like, all you ever hear about is what he's not. Like, he's actually a very good basketball player, mate. Like, you know what I mean? He's got like certain aspects. He's one of the best. Here's one that people don't realize. Because people don't care about defense, dude, he's one of the best defenders in the NBA, like, of his generation. He's actually very good. Like, so anyway, the point is, there's a lot of names we can go through. So this is going to be more, to me, the primer for today's basketball. You can think of these three episodes as like, the first one was the mega overview boomer one. The second was sort of in the middle, because we were doing some of the modern day ones and giving references. And then now we're going to get into a lot of the modern day people, and we'll keep mixing the themes up. So give me your first name. Just give me a name from anywhere. Yeah. It can be any pool you want for this one.
Well, I made this list in order of people that are under 25 years old, and I scaled them in terms of least likely of these 6 names, I think that I have, I actually have 7 names, least likely to make it to the top 100 list to the most likely. So I think by the time I actually get to my later ones, you might have already mentioned some of the people, honestly, that I'm going to be bringing up. I'm pretty sure you're going to at least bring up one of them. So this is kind of like, I'm starting with the most hipster pick possible, and I'm kind of giving a weird reason for it. So the first guy that I'm picking, who I'd say that most people probably haven't watched too much of, is Scottie Barnes. He's 21 years old. Okay. He plays for the Toronto Raptors. And the reason that I think he has a case in the distant future to make it to the top 100 list is because of what's going on in his career right now, where he's 6'8" and he's swapping from the power forward position for the Raptors to the point guard position, because they think that his just like floor general ability is good enough that they're going to be able to run the offense completely through him, because they lost Fred VanVleet to Houston and he was running the point for the Raptors. And it's not like Scottie Barnes had like incredible numbers. He brought up he was 15, 7, and 5, and just for future reference on all shows, I'm just going to round to the nearest whole number on these things. I'm not going to always say 15.2 or whatever. Like, so 15, 7, and 5 were his numbers, and that's points, rebounds, assists as per the usual ordering on that. And what I really like about what Scottie Barnes brings is that, like, frame wise already, just an anomaly in terms of what the point guard position is. Like, he's kind of in that almost Giannis tier of like how it's just so, like, he's going to be such a mismatch on the outside, on the perimeter, for basically anybody that wants to guard him, because one, he's quite fast, and two, also his interior penetration ability is pretty strong too. And so where I see most of like Scottie Barnes' ability is when he kind of gets inside and when he's able to like go for an interior pass. And I think that in a way, like, again, this is my least likely candidate to make it to the top 100, but I think there is a distant chance that he does it, because with his career arc and how it's changing so drastically.
I was just calling his shot basically on this one. He knows this one's like, he's only played 2 years, remember, guys. He's not pretending he's a bona fide lock.
Yeah, but it's just kind of like if I want to pick somebody that's like, a little bit more of a long shot scenario, this is my guy right now.
Okay.
So I think that also a lot of the like in terms of what Toronto's looking forward to, it's kind of like I think Scottie Barnes and Siakam are kind of their two guys right now, and so I think that like they're going to be a really interesting duo to see how they play on the floor together.
Listen, it's not a player I've tunneled in on loan. So what I will just say is this. I will just give some more brief comments, which is, I'll tell you one thing I think is a mega underrated story. This is how you know, right? I'll give you the quick analogy. It goes like this, right? There's loads of fans say this to me. You might get the same thing, I don't know. But I get all these morons on Twitter when I used to read the replies where their go-to diss was like this. It was like, all you do is tweet drama tweets for attention. And the reason why, if you say that to me, you've actually just told on yourself. You haven't said anything about me. Is because I create more content than like anyone ever. So what you're actually saying there is I just ignore all the really great content you made and only come when you do. So the joke is like, well, it's you then. You're the one that's into the drama. So the reason people in the NBA only care about WWE, Vince McMahon style storylines and super teams is because I'll tell you one thing no one ever bothers bringing up. I find it so mad, mate. I get that it got lost in the offseason afterwards and all the drama. Like, why does no one ever mention, by the way, that fucking Raptors team that we're talking about, that Kawhi won with all those years ago? Why did they ever break that lineup up? Am I missing something? Look, I get that they had to hit that crazy Game 7 shot to make it and all this shit. And let's be real, if like the Warriors had even one less injury, they might have still won. Like, it was still very close. But, mate, that low-key was an amazingly GM'd team because everyone knows the Kawhi angle, but they talk like it was Kawhi versus the... It wasn't. First of all, Fred VanVleet was really good that year. And then the Siakam guy... That was exactly when he was starting to peak. Like, I'm not joking, guys. If you look at the fucking... I know some of it is injuries, but if you look at how whack all the fucking Kawhi teams since have been, bro, he should have just stayed in this team. This team was actually loaded. Like, it actually looks like the next years it was going to be even better. Like, what we're talking about here, think about this guy joined now. Like, mate, you would have had a really deep fucking team now. Like, it actually... Because as I say, those two players, Siakam and Fred VanVleet, were pretty under the radar. They weren't big names. And Toronto's not the biggest... I think that lineup was weird, mad underrated, mate. Whoever GM'd that squad killed it.
Yeah, and the thing is that like, well, it really just boils down to Kawhi wanting to join the Clippers to team up with Paul George. If that didn't happen, if Kawhi had a little bit more foresight and also just kind of respected what the Raptors did by like bringing that team together in the form that it was in, it was almost like for Kawhi, like, well, one, he was also from the LA area, so it's like he wanted to go home or whatever, but it's like, dude, come on. You're making millions of dollars and your whole like career legacy is on the line. It's not that crazy to just go to Toronto. Like it's not even a bad city. It's not like you're going to,
by the way,
Oklahoma.
I'll tell you the underrated part as well. He already won the one ring there. Mate, if you go and win like 3 rings in a Canadian basketball team, you'll be like a legend forever. You will for
You'll
real.
be a country hero. Yeah.
They'll make you pretty goated, yeah, of course.
You'll probably become an honorary citizen at that. They'll give you like keys to the city. So yeah. Okay. I think that's mostly my piece on Barnes there and everything.
Right, let's do this then. We'll just go name for name then. Because actually, if we're going to bring that up, let's do the Paul George one. I actually want to get your thoughts on Paul. Because here's the thing. Paul George isn't going to be on the NBA 100. At least he better not spoil it. He should, if he was going to, his generation already had the 75ers. He didn't make it. So I'm guessing he ain't making the cut. But as I said, I actually think this is an example of a player where modern NBA sports ball and talking head thinking has ruined players like this. Because this player is never supposed to actually compete with LeBron, Mauisnake. He's not that sort of player. The whole joke is, this is why it's actually a tragedy that him and Kawhi both have those insane injury problems. Because their super team, here's what's sad, the super teams that Durant and Harden and Kyrie Irving, they're bozos, mate. I knew those teams aren't working. That's like when fucking idiots like Nico just want Neo to join and be the adjunct. You know what I mean? Like, that's that level of thinking. The Kawhi Paul George one, if they didn't get injured, would have been a really fucking scary team. I don't think people get that one, mate. Like, those two are both killers on defense. They're both really fucking versatile wing players. And also, here's the dumbest part about where people don't understand. It's not a problem if you have a weakness, Maui. I always say this. In the best team, if we're teammates and we should team up together, it's because like my strength would somehow cover your weakness or shore it up a bit. So I actually think as well, if they could have ever kept this line, this lineup actually would have been the one that would have set Paul George's rep. He was good when he was on the Pacers, but like, mate, if he was able to play the proper defense, he's already a good player anyway, and then he has Kawhi to close the game. bro, that actually could have been a really good team. Like, I actually think Paul George is an underrated player, basically. I think he's just become a meme, sadly. Like, I noticed, this is one thing, just as a quick aside, that I hate about modern day sports culture. It's worse than HLTV.org in the NBA, bro. Like, have you ever seen in the modern day what the Zoomer comments are like on, like, Instagram and stuff? It's like, if you're just not Michael Jordan, you suck, bro. For real.
Yeah.
Like, they'll just comment and, like, mate, they'll have a video where, like, Gary Payton or something says, who the fuck do you know? Like, you're saying the Gary Payton sucks at basketball now. Like, everyone sucks by that. Like, so to me, Paul George is like, he's been a meme because everyone thinks, oh, lol, who cares? He's just irrelevant. And also, he's a choker in the playoffs. It's like, yeah, he is, but that's just because he's not the ultimate closer. I actually think his skill set's really impressive. He's got a nice fucking game, mate.
Yeah, with Paul George, I would say that what's really impressive about him is that for the last, say, almost 10 years, he's been basically a top 4 power small forward in the league. Like, basically, he's always, the problem is also, like, he's always been in LeBron's shadow, off of a lot of those, like, Indiana series where he was on when he was playing still for the Pacers, and he would just keep losing to LeBron there. But, like, when it comes to what Paul George has in terms of skill set, like, there were years where really the only 2 small forwards you would say are better than him are LeBron and Kawhi. But Kawhi obviously has to be healthy for that to even be relevant. But, like, again, like, Paul George is a player where it's like, because he just didn't have success on, like, the biggest stage, and he probably, another thing is, like, he couldn't, in my eyes, be the best player on a championship team. And for a lot of these top 100 players that we would see for the future, they kind of have to be.
They should
the
be.
best.
Yes.
Yeah, they should be. And it's not that he, like, had no playoff success at all. Like, he's won many series in the playoffs here and there. So, like, I don't really think that there's, like, with Paul George, it's just like position for position. Also, because he's always going to finish behind LeBron. He didn't end up actually getting too many, like, all NBA first teams. He got one all NBA first team, and then he got a bunch of third teams. He actually never got a second team. But in terms of, like, defense, yeah, he was, like, 4 times on all defensive teams.
That was mega.
And, like, in terms of just locking people down, like, very versatile defender, can lock down perimeter players, pretty good from the mid range. You wouldn't obviously, like, call upon him to, like, block somebody at the rim, but, like, that really covers, like, so many of the shots that people are taking in the NBA today. So I think also, like with Paul George's career trajectory, like, he was, like, in the very beginning of his tenure in the league, or his career, it's just like he was kind of, like, not really panning out as a Pacers player. And then he had that 2013 breakout season where he won Most Improved Player. And that was, I'm pretty sure that was, like, in tandem with him, like, making the playoffs, him being a really strong player for them there. And that was, like, honestly, I felt like we were going to see another guy that's going to challenge LeBron there. Like, I thought there was a shot in those, like, early 2010 years. But, like, it's just that he never really got much better after getting better. Like, he had his one leap, but we never really saw a second leap. And it's pretty rare already to get the one leap out of professional basketball players, let alone a second.
Yeah, to me, the main thing is you have to focus on the defense. Because another thing as well about someone like Paul George is, here's what's funny. I think this is also why people think he sucks, Mauisnake. People do this really stupid thing about defense in the NBA, where they act like if you're actually the best defender, you never get beaten. And it's like, mate, with the modern rules, you always get beaten. It's more like you have to, the concept from League of Legends, if people know this term, is, you know, in League, obviously there's 3 different lanes, but there's only so much attention you can give to each one. So the one that has no attention gets called the weak side, right? And that's the logic, is that you're obviously not going to play with, like, jungle attention or ganks or whatever. If you do that, right, the logic goes, you're probably going to lose. So you lose gracefully is the way you say it. Like, you just lose by the least amount possible, and you do, like, quite a good job with minimal resources, low economy, basically, is what we'd say in Counter-Strike. Like, you don't get any utility, you don't get any space, but you still do, like, perfecto, basically. So to me, it's like, that's the sort of player you have to be, though. Is like, the one thing that sucks is this. People act like the lockdown defender really just locks you down every time. He doesn't, especially not with the modern rules. And so to me, the other problem Paul George has is he's in a million clips getting wrecked, right? He's the one that they're hitting the Kobe and Durant and fucking LeBron are all hitting the shot on. But that's one thing that's actually, this is counterintuitive, fans, but you understand. That's why I respect Paul George. Because he actually takes the assignment. Like, bro, I've mentioned this in the past episode. Spoiler, it's going to be something I'm going to hate a lot. I think it's so whack how rarely I've ever seen LeBron actually in the playoff game go, you know what, let me me take the other best player. Even when they play his position, he doesn't do it. Like, that's one of the things I think is so whack. So to me, if you do that, it's why I said earlier, that's why the thing for me with Paul George is this, is if you only focus on him being a star, like we said at the 100 NBA 100, he shouldn't be on there because he wouldn't be able to do a Dirk and win the championship by himself, as it were, you know. By the way, spoiler, I also think Russell Westbrook doesn't either, but I get it that point guards are sort of treated in a different category because it's more just about your assists and all that jazz. To be fair, point guards, we can get to that in another episode probably one time. It's actually a really hard one to rank because essentially, by definition, you set other people up, but at the same time, you can be, you know what I mean? Like, that's one of those ones I find quite tricky to break down myself. So the problem with the Paul George one is, I actually think that's why I said earlier, if you had the right team, I think he actually would be an amazing, like, sidekick and could win a championship, mate, because one, he plays defense. That's amazing for this modern generation. And then two, I actually think he himself gets it now, because if you watch his podcast, the reason why his podcast is very good if no one's seen it is because he does know a bit, but he's not like, essentially, here's the problem, he doesn't do what Gilbert Arenas does, which is Gilbert Arenas is really entertaining, but then the ego's too much. It's like, bro, you know, you were just Gilbert Arenas, right? You're talking like you're Michael Jordan, mate. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, so the thing is, Paul George seems very even keeled. So to me, I get his career now after watching that podcast. He just doesn't have the mentality of like I'm the alpha dog fucking number one. If anything, he's primed to be a sidekick. He actually seems like he'd be awesome at that. And if he does, he's going to play defense. Someone else can, like I said, someone like Kawhi can close the game out. Like,
he got sunned by LeBron too many times. That's pretty much why. Like, you just keep losing to the same guy over and over again. You just realize I'm not. No,
but in the modern day though, that's actually underrated because in the modern day, there's like 50 guys think they're LeBron, mate. That they're just the man and they're going to carry the game. Like that. I actually think that's the biggest sickness of the modern day is because everyone can average 30 points. They all actually think they're like the shit. Like, we'll get to some names later where like some of these guys, they're just so blown out of reality. So to me, it's more like I just find it interesting, like what he could bring to a team. All right, what about this then? Since we brought him up there, what about his teammate Kawhi? What do you think of him?
Well, Kawhi already made it to the top 75 list.
And, no, I mean, he has already, but I mean, where do you have him? Because the problem, I think, with him as a player, let's be honest, he's got the one ring. Because of injuries, no one knows if he'll ever get any more. I feel like part of the problem with his career is
he's got two, or for the
whole Spurs thing make people, most people weren't watching him at that point in time, so I feel like they actually didn't see him in that era, and then later because he's just been injured. I think most people have done that thing where they put him on pause for like 5 years in their brain and they act like his career never continues. So where's it Kawhi at for you as a great player?
Well, I think that he comfortably slots into top 60, I'd say top 50 players all time right now. I think that his peak for what he was able to accomplish with the 2014 Spurs, where he was just like, he was kind of like owning LeBron in terms of defense there. That was like, but that was kind of like Kawhi's coming out for a lot of the general public, where it was like, oh, okay, this guy is actually the best defender in the league, bar none. And then also winning Finals MVP with like a really solid scoring performance too. That was huge. And then to do it 5 years later, I mean, what really sucks about Kawhi is that it's just one of the most injury-plagued careers that I've seen for someone that's this transcendent as an individual. Like, in terms of, what is it, the last 5 seasons, he has never played over 60 games, and he has a whole season where he basically missed it. So that's where it's like, you're never really going to actually rack up, like, longevity and arguments are just gone for Kawhi out the window. You basically have to approach him with using the peak angle, and his peak has been incredibly high given the individual awards that he's won. Defense Player of the Year twice, not even in his seasons where he was winning championships. And clearly, like, when he's able to play for like 60 plus games in a season, he makes such a massive difference for them. And like, he was also always, every time, like, a lot of my lens for viewing these players is how they do against the Warriors. Every time I watch this guy play the Warriors, it was like, there's just no assignment that can work. Like, and the Warriors had like top #1 defenses in the league for a while. So when people are able to scorch the Warriors, then I also am recognizing like how off the wall, how off the charts they are in terms of their own individual bag, where it's just that Kawhi would just take 2 dribbles in, probably like 12-foot jumper, just sink it over and over again. And it's just that modern defensive schemes are meant to block the 3-point line, and they're meant to block the inside game. And for Kawhi, he doesn't really need that. He's such a proficient mid-range shooter that's why he can always find a shot no matter what. Like, he doesn't necessarily have the sickest handle by any means, but another thing is like his defense, like his hand size is just crazy. The amount of times he gets his middle fingertip on the ball as it's releasing from even someone like Steph Curry is just unbelievable. Like if there were a stat that were basically like times that people have blocked Steph Curry's shot off the dribble per assignment, I'm pretty sure Kawhi might lead that list. Like it would be, he was so good at it because he's just kind of like, he's sneakily long because of how giant his hands are and how long his wingspan is. It's like, it's actually like Giannis, but it's almost just like he's actually better with his hands. He almost has like more, I'd say he has more coordination than Giannis when it comes to defense. So I mean, firmly a top 50 player all time for me. So, yeah, what about you on Kawhi?
I mean, I also think he's mega. I actually think the sad thing is because of all the injuries and the fact that, like, the other thing is because the media narrative was like, he's on the Clippers now, it's their time to take over the Lakers before LeBron came, obviously. Because that never happened, like the storyline, they never made it in the playoffs and they famously blew that one super early on. They weren't supposed to, like, just made people make them again. Like, and they haven't made Kawhi a meme, but they just don't care about him anymore, I've noticed. He seems like he's just been treated like he's irrelevant. Because the sad thing is, like, as you're setting up there, this actually is such a cursed generation because of the injuries to people like Kawhi and Durant. Like, bro, small forward, this should be like the golden generation. Look who you've got. You have got, like, when he was still there, you had fucking LeBron, you had Carmelo, you had fucking Kevin Durant, Paul George. Like, this is a fucking unbelievable. And by the way, it makes perfect sense. It's the stretch four era. Of course, the small forwards essentially are all. The joke is even the small forwards are shooting guards now. Like, we all know the NBA. Like, by the way, Kawhi himself has a fucking mega 3-point shot. He just chooses not to do it all the time because, as you're saying, he also has the old school mid-range game because he played for the Spurs and he's actually a bit of a throwback player. It's actually one thing I really like about Kawhi's game. I do think, basically, the problem is if you look at his career already, there's too many injuries. Like, it's too late. Like, you're not going to get another 10 solid years of being a stud. Like, for him right now, you want basically a couple more cracks at the playoffs. It's about the best you can hope for. Because if you look at his career, and let's be real, the other problem he has is, even when he wasn't injured, he already was the original load management motherfucker. Remember, he used to do that back in the Spurs. Like, the joke is, remember, the Spurs themselves basically invented load management, Maui, because it was for Tim Duncan at the end of the season when he was old. And then Kawhi just started opting into it, if you remember, just going, actually, I'll just take like 10 games off. Like, what? Like, yeah. But that was when he was like 22. I was like, what? So that combined with actually having real injuries, like you're saying, he's actually, people don't know how absurd how few games he's played. Like, in his entire career, he's played 2 times 70 games. People don't know. You can go look that up. That sounds impossible. Like, it's way worse than anything. So basically, if you take all this into account, mate, I actually agree. I actually think he's basically the most underrated player of this generation. Like, I know he got mega hyped when he was in his peak, and people thought they were going too far because they did the Zemu thing where he hadn't yet done it yet, but they gave him, like, the status of, like, you've done it for 10 years. He could have, though. Like, if you actually look now, in hindsight, if this guy didn't have injuries, holy shit, he could have just run the NBA. Because as you're saying, he's basically, it's a bit like Kevin Durant. Just the frame they have alone is like someone is cheating in, like, the create a player in the NBA game or whatever. Like, you've made the most, it's like Kevin Durant, you've made the most unguardable skill set. So let me just check this, right? So you've got fucking handles, you really good mid-range bag, you mega at the 3-point shot, and you played it, fuck off. Like, what? In that scenario, you wouldn't play your friend if he made that character, would you? Because you'd be like, am I going to have fun? What's the point in this? So if the joke is it's already injuries that offset someone like this, like, his skill set is fucking unbelievable. And also, even that whole shit people have of like, yeah, but he's a bit weird person, isn't he? Yeah. If you haven't learned yet, I hope people really are learning this, and anyone from esports will know this even more than modern fans. They're all fucking weird. What mind space do you think you're in when you are some guy like a Nico in CSGO, right? I would expect, you know, when people go a bit arrogant, do you know how arrogant I would be if I was that good at my job, by the way? Like, I'm pretty bad already. I'm pretty intolerable as it is. Like, if I could essentially at will just do the greatest things of all time, yeah, I might be a bit out of control, Maui, and have all deluded. It's why, in a weird way, I don't blame people like Shocks when they're like, I could just have my mate playing the team. Maybe you can, mate. You're that cracked out. You might be able to win while doing that, like they do sometimes. Like, I wouldn't do it because I'm a mere mortal. I've got to, like, you know, stack the squad, have the right player. These guys, I get why they get deluded. So to me, it's also why it's not a surprise to me in a weird way. So I say I don't want players making choices that people like Kawhi and Durant make these terrible career decisions, because in their mind they themselves essentially are the best, and if they just keep going they're going to be the best. So then their whole shit, as far as I can tell, even though I disagree, is I don't think they even make these teams on real basketball shit. I think for real they all, the modern generation's biggest problem is they are all just like weirdo zoomers on phones who don't have any social ability. So what they seem to make the teams for is just for friends. Have you noticed that?
Yeah,
they seem to for real just get their friends and go, I've already won a championship, so should we just have a friends team? And then they think they're going to win doing that. Like, so I mean, that's the only knock I have on Kawhi's injuries and the weird friend thing. That he also does this weird thing where he's just drawn to certain players. So it's like, just join the best team, mate. Just let someone else make a squad.
The friend thing is so egregious when it comes like with Durant and Kyrie. There was actually a case for it. There's actually like a slight case. Like you have a championship winning point guard, you have a championship winning small forward, but then they were like, but let's do it with DeAndre Jordan. And we're like, what? That dude is well over the hump in terms of his career. So it's just.
I mean, mate, the craziest one to me still is when they made the super team with Harden. Because, like, listen, you don't even. It's like you'd think this was a Saturday Night Live sketch. Surely you just walk in and the first question is this, Maui? But isn't there only one ball? You know what? And then you just leave. Yeah. Like, isn't that it? Like, bro, you're already joining James Harden. Like, there's only one ball. Like, what are you two going to do? Just stand and watch him? Spoiler, that is literally. Well, the joke is they would never all be game at the same time. But if they had him, they would have stood and watched each other take the ball. Yeah.
That was the line though they used for the Warriors, of course, when Durant joined. It's like there's only one ball, but it's like, yeah, but you have three guys that are incredible at playing off ball. Like Durant, Thompson, and Curry can all just run without the ball and be a threat. So it doesn't even matter. But like Harden is no threat when he's just standing around. Like, in fact, he looks like he's so disinterested in the game that he's playing right then. And Kyrie too, for that matter. They both just look like they completely check out, and they don't just like run around the court. There was that great clip actually that Curry had recently at his basketball camp. I think it just happened a few days ago, probably in the last week, where he was telling the students at the camp that were participating, like don't just go to like outside the 3-point line and just ask ball, run around, like try to like cut, keep going in, set a screen, like do something, be active. He said like calling for ball is the weakest move you can make in basketball. And I know that he was just channeling how he felt about playing with certain teammates in the past, because I mean, like Curry is like he's like a paragon of ball movement. Like he is literally setting the standard for what everybody should aspire to do at all times, given that he has the most he always has the most like miles ran in the NBA every like per minute or something like, or per game. So I can move on to my.
No, by the way, I'll just give you a quick comment on that. That is actually one thing that is mad underrated about Steph Curry's game, if people don't know. It's that he does both. He does the Reggie Miller run off a million screens and like disrupt the defense. But then he also, like we were referencing earlier, is probably the best shooter ever off the dribble while guarded. So he actually just has both parts to his game. It's actually a mad underrated part. Yeah, go on then. Give me another name.
Okay, so another guy under 25 that has potential to get into the top 100 at one point is a guy that's also injury plagued. Is Zion Williamson. Pretty far out there, but 6'6" power forward, so undersized, but like way too strong for his position. And when I was watching his last season, he had a 26, 7, and 5 split, but he barely plays. That's the biggest problem. Like he basically just barely scratches over, I want to say like sometimes it's like 20 games. I think he's had last season, he had 29 games played. The season before that, he was injured with a foot injury. The season before that, he had 61. And in his rookie season, he only had 24 games played. So this guy's never even cracked 62 games played in an 82-game season. And that's why it's like really unlikely that he actually makes it to that pedestal or enters that hall of greatness. But it's that with Zion, when I was watching his college play at Duke, I was like, surely he's just bowling over these kids because he's huge, he's oversized, he has some crazy genetics, and he probably just eats a lot, and he somehow maintains athleticism. But the concerns coming into the NBA were always like, can he actually bully NBA players with this kind of stature who are grown men? And the answer actually was unequivocally yes. Like he can actually still do a lot of the same things in terms of his like 2-point percentage. As a 6'6" player, it's above 61% for his career. Like that is crazy, because he's just so good at getting in close and just kind of like, even without the longest arms, like he's not nearly as lanky as a lot of these guys in this league. He can just kind of use his body control in the air to just be an above the rim threat so frequently that it's really just like, he to me is blockbuster stuff when he's healthy, and when he's especially playing a team that's a little bit more porous on defense. Because when I get to see Zion just carve up a team that, you know, is probably like middle of the road defense in the league, it is so like there's nobody else in the league right now that feels like they can contribute in the same way. It almost feels like you took away like 6 inches off of Shaq's height and then just gave him an even faster motor, and you just now have this new guy that like is kind of breaking the mold for what a power forward should be in the league, and an undersized one at that. In fact, if I have to like really compare him to anybody in the league in the past, it's almost like Barkley-esque, where he's just sprinting. But the problem with Zion, and why I don't actually know if he'll ever be a championship contributing player, is that he doesn't really lock in on defense. Like I've seen him sometimes, like even with these crazy athletic gifts, sometimes he just can't really like match up 1-to-1 against people that he should not be getting beat off the dribble by some of these guys, given that his first step is so ferocious, and yet he does. And sometimes like off-ball defense, he just falls asleep. Like he's clearly like an offensive minded person right now. And beyond that, like his other stats aren't like super impressive. I mean, like the rebounding is for his size, it is pretty impressive, but I've yet to really see him in other ways contribute to the team aspect of the game. And so like it almost feels like you'd have to design a system for Zion to be your best player, which would be such an awkward way to like focus on essentially an undersized power forward. And I think that in the future, he could probably show to the league that he's a top 5 player in the league, which is why he could actually enter this top 100 all-time conversation. But it's just that in terms of championship aspirations, I kind of find that he's going to probably face similar blocks in his career as did Barkley, where there's just going to be a guy that's a little bit better on the perimeter, probably a more engaged defender, and that's going to be better as a first overall option than he is.
Yeah, basically, if it wasn't for the injury factor, which in this case is one of the most extreme I've ever seen, like you say, like basically injury might mean he just never even gets a proper career. Like thus far, he's basically played almost one season. That's it. Like, yeah. And then also because he plays for the Pelicans, it was somewhat irrelevant. Like that means no playoffs, no one really gives a shit anyway. And basically, all people are watching for is for you to just play and ball out, basically, which he hasn't been able to do. But I agree. Bear in mind, he's only played such a limited amount of time. This is one of those rare players where, okay, so everyone saw the like recent Wemby thing, which they do if not every year, every 2 years in the NBA, they act like the next player coming in is Michael Jordan, is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. They just always go too far with it, right? The joke is, though, this is one of the times they did it on this player, where I remember doing the same thing, going and watching the highlights and being like, mate, there's only 2 ways this goes. Like you say, either it just turns out he really was just like slightly oversized for college, and as a result he's got the cheat code, or this just translates to the NBA, as it did, by the way, minus the injuries. And like this is like one of the most eye test, lock, fucking slam dunk best 100 players ever you will ever see. Because like you say, there's a reason why on Inside the NBA they've joked in the past that it's like Shaquille O'Neal and Charles Barkley had a baby. Because I agree. Like, first of all, on the Barkley one, he's probably the only person you can compare him to, because these are both people that are undersized. But what's weird is, this is a really counterintuitive point, is that can actually help you in the NBA, because the reason why Barkley could back everyone down is because he has a lower center of gravity. Yep. So essentially, even if you were the same weight as him, like you're a center, it doesn't work. Like he's sort of like banging against your hips, as it were, your knees. So as a result, they can always go past. And then also the other thing is, I know what you mean about the Shaq angle. It's basically that the part about Shaq that's really underrated is everyone did that stupid thing where, because they only ever talk about Shaq and Wilt Chamberlain as these like dominant forces, they make it sound like all they did is just slam the ball on you. Whereas like Shaquille O'Neal had like amazing fucking like grace on his toes and his footwork for such a massive guy. Like, if people don't get it, he actually for real had like post moves that were like almost more like what like you would expect from like a really lanky center or something, or someone who isn't really heavy. Like his ability to like spin and step were fucking unbelievable. That's why his drop step's probably one of the best moves ever in the NBA. It's the same thing with Zion. Like, he has unbelievable actual like body control. Like, he's another one that really is just like a genetic freak. Like, when you look at them, you're like, that, like, this is the skill set I would want. Like, all the other shit is great, like, yeah, shooting, skills. Just give me essentially like cheat code like that, where you're just like some Greek god. And yeah, you should be dominant. And to me, the other thing as well on this player is this is actually an angle that I want to open up generally, because if we talk later about people like Joel Embiid, I think we can have this conversation. Giannis, I actually think a mad underrated aspect, we could talk about this now if you want, it'd probably be a good time, is There's this whole perception that I think's really lazy that all the sports ball shows do, where they go like this. They go, Steph Curry ruined the NBA, man, because everyone just shoots threes now. And I've sent you that like thing where if people know Kyle Goldsberry, the guy who does all those shot charts.
Kurt Goldsberry.
Kurt Goldsberry. Yeah. Basically, in the modern day, everything is a three-point shot or just like a layup at the basket, basically. Whereas in the old days, it was all like everything was a mid-range shot, right? The problem is, it isn't as hard and fast as people say, essentially, Maui. Like, I'll just set it up and I'll get your thoughts, basically. The quick version goes like this. One, I don't think Steph Curry at all ruined the NBA because Steph Curry isn't what all the NBA players are. He is the outsider. He is the exception. He is the outlier that you ignore. And actually, if anything, Steph Curry, I actually think his career proves, by the way, that actually being the greatest shooter isn't the number one skill of all time because even a shooter, like, it's the most obvious thing that will go dodgy when you get pressured. Like, the point I was going to make to bring back to this is, I think people like Giannis, this guy Zion, if he stays healthy, there's always going to be a winning strategy to build around a player like that. Because at the end of the day, even if he chokes Maui, he's choking a foot away from the basket. Like, the difference is it's a lot easier to like get a twitch and miss a 35-foot bomb as opposed to if I get a bit of a twitch and I miss a hook, it might still go in. You see what I mean, guys? Like, that is just a fundamentally easier way to win at basketball. So, to me, I actually think players like this get underrated as a result. Same with people like Embiid, etc. Like, look, when we get to it, I think he is an overrated player, Embiid, but, like, his actual skill set is mega for the modern NBA. Dude, those guys tear the game up all day long. Like, all they do all day long is no one can contain them inside. The rules are all favoured to them, and they just score all day long or get the rebound. Like, I think this guy's right in that vein. Like, sadly, you notice a lot of them have these injury issues, though. A lot of them in the modern day. Like, it does seem like, in fact, if you notice on this episode, the thing about the modern days, I don't know if some of this is like they used to just hide it or people thought you had to play through injury, but doesn't it feel like in the modern day, like half the bloody superstars are just injured at any point in time? It's a bit whack, isn't it?
I think they've been talking about it also, like fining players essentially for just like rest. Like basically, if you can take money away from the player for like just rest days or like basically meaningless or like very small injuries that just sound like they just kind of fabricated it in order just to like give the guy a few days off or whatever. Because the thing is, like, fans are actually traveling to games from across the globe to see their favorite players, and then they don't even get to see them sometimes. So yeah, it's super frustrating. Embiid, I mean, even Curry's taking some days off here and there. I mean,
what
like,
do you think on that bigger topic, though? Because obviously it's a classic one that they all hit, but they never actually explore it. Like, they're just like, it's all just 3-pointers now. What do you think on that whole topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, John Hollinger was like one of the people that really got on that, one of the big analytics guys, the guy that made the PER rating that some people put stock into, by the way, but it kind of reads to me like HLTV rating a little bit, where it's like it is actually pretty good at analyzing who's strong and who's not. Yes. But I think he and other like analytics heads were people that were just kind of like, well, I think like on average an NBA team is trying to score like 1.05 points per possession, and if you shoot 50% from two, or like just like 51% from two, and you shoot like 34% from three, you're essentially doing that. Some numbers, yes. Like that's how they're supposed to break down more or less. And so that's of course if you get the ball off, not including turnovers or just like block shots, but with yeah, with how the league's going or trended into that direction, I actually think that what has actually is kind of like, in esports, what you see is usually like metas are cyclical, at least in games like CSGO to an extent, where like if a certain strategy becomes too prevalent, then usually the counter to that strategy will follow suit. And then it's almost like you have to counter that strategy with a new strategy, and which is why the game usually never gets boring. Unfortunately, with basketball, it's somewhat figured out from a number standpoint, but because teams tailor their defenses so heavily to stop the shots from the outside and from the inside, it actually does open up the mid-range game, which is why in playoff series, people like Kawhi, Durant, they're so valuable, because if they can just score from the mid-range at like a 55% clip, then they're basically the best player on the floor because no defensive scheme is actually set out to stop them. So it like kind of shows that transcendent scorers can still have huge amounts of impact like that. But I will say, like, my least favorite thing about the NBA now is that I used to very frequently back in the early 2010s when I was like trying to get involved with working in the NBA, like really actually like working towards that goal and like working in through a lot of my stats classes with putting together NBA related stats projects, was that I was like I would just put League Pass on and I would just watch random games and they'd be exciting. The teams would have a lot of diversity in terms of play style. I would get to see like, oh, this team wants to like really like pound it inside, like the old Grizzlies lineups when they were using like Gasol and they were using Randolph.
Yeah, I know what you're on about. Yeah.
And then there was like the triple like guard lineup of like the Suns in the early 2010s, and it was just like, wow, they're just trying to play like super fast and they like try to hope they outscore their opponents. And then like now when I watch almost any game on any given day between like two teams that are kind of just like basically like tanking in a way, they're basically just playing this like space and pace like chuck ball shit where it's just like they're just like bombing like so many times. They're just trying to swing it for a corner three or they're trying to get like some good pass, and it feels like I'm watching college basketball. It feels so bad, it's so bland, and that's why in some ways it's nice to see star players, and you actually just flat out need star power, because that's almost like the only diversity I see in some of these games. The only diversity I see, the only like idiosyncrasies I see in teams is how they play around their star players who are going beyond the system. Because when they just follow what they think is proper basketball now to just play that space and pace style, it's so bland. And also what you end up seeing is sometimes 6 possessions in a row, corner three miss, like it's just like it's like, oh, they try to go inside and they just kind of like whiff a layup or whatever because the center was in position, but they just thought they had to take that shot. And it's like they've just drilled into these players so hard, this hard fast way to play the game, and it seems so devoid of life and soul, whereas 15 years ago I could tell you every style of every team, and they were unique and diverse.
I've got a couple of angles on this. So one is like we can go to the specific or the general. If you want to make it more abstract, here's the reason why I think that whole philosophy doesn't work. First of all, you do this with, if people don't know, this is basic science. Like when you do a bunch of results, you take like a sample of 100 samples of a wire's whatever fucking resistance or something, right? If one of them is like 10 times more than the others, you throw the outlier out and look at the pattern in general. So what people have done is they've taken the outlier, which is Steph Curry. And by the way, as we've talked about in the past episodes, the reason why Steph Curry is not like any other three-point shooter, including Klay Thompson, is because Klay Thompson gets past the ball and shoots the ball. Steph Curry just does whatever he wants. The joke is Steph Curry does like a Tatum move, then shoots just as accurate as Klay Thompson. Because, there's another thing, by the way. I've always understood that debate perfectly. I've thought it was very well phrased by experts. If you actually look, like who on the video looks like the better shooter, it should be Klay Thompson. He probably has the most perfect shot ever. But the point is, even he can't do what Steph Curry can. Like, Steph Curry's fucking on another level. So to me, that whole angle of like, oh, it's just a 3-point game. It isn't. Like, I actually think this is where coaches have lost the plot in the NBA, bro, because one, like, yes, if I have those players, if I have Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, I'm going to shoot loads of threes, obviously, but I've also got 2 absurdly like outlier players at 3-point shooting. But then also, I think there's 2 aspects to this. One is a really subtle one that no one ever bothers bringing up, Maui, which is this. Bearing in mind, right, it's very different to play a regular season game and a playoff game. We all know they ref the game differently in the playoffs. The pressure is different in the playoffs. You yourself are thinking different things. In a regular season game, you think, whatever, it's just a game. You shoot the bomb. If it hits, right? One thing no one ever brings up when they talk about which shot you should take, right? They just run the numbers that you do of whether they make the shot or not. Here's one thing I find really weird. Shouldn't there be like an implied value of whether you get fouled or not? Like, why is that not factored in? Because here's what makes it suck to shoot a 3-pointer, like you're saying. If you just straight up miss, you get nothing from that play. It's just the ball wig, woo! And in the modern day, because everyone's not crowding the pit, you might even get the fucking rebound. That might just be the end. There you go, give the ball back, essentially. Like, if you go in, especially in like, not at the end of a playoff game, you're going to get fouled if you actually go to the basket, as LeBron hopes. But the more important thing is this. The reason you probably are going to get fouled if you have a mid-range is because they're scared of you just stopping on a dime and doing like a hook or doing a fucking mid-range floater, which at that point, if you don't... The reason why that's beautiful, if people are like not old school fans, is because as long as you actually do like outwit the defender, you're basically just not guarded at that point in time. You're just like fucking floating in the air, just seeing, can I hit the shot? And so if you're really good at it, it's really satisfying. Like, there's a reason why all the great point guards in history, they're not shooting it. They've all got like a teardrop, a fucking layup. Like they've just got a package where they're super high quality shot to hit. I actually think a modern day example I could give you, by the way, we'll get to him later maybe, is Chris Paul. What a fucking mega underrated player. This is a guy, he can get a fucking shot off at the hoop anytime he wants, by the way. He's about 4 foot tall, like, mega player. Maybe has attitude issues, there's some other shit we can get into. But so to me, I actually think the part that they've missed is this. I do think 3-point shooting obviously should make up like some of the volume of your game. Like, we all run the numbers now. We know that it's worth more. It's like, essentially, people don't know, like Maui says, unless you shoot like 55% from 2, which is like the greatest players in the whole league for efficiency. If you're good at 3-point shooting, you should shoot 3-point shots. Like, it actually makes mathematical sense. But I just think essentially for psychological reasons, it's not as reliable in playoff games and people overemphasize it as a result. Like, the reason why I find it weird is, take the example I gave, the exception of the Warriors. Dude, how many times have the Warriors in really big playoff series actually just gone crazy in the fourth quarter and just shot all the 3 pointers and shot people off the game? Not that often. That's really overblown, bro. That's maybe like the odd Rockets game back in the day, a couple of games against the Thunder here and there. They're not, people act like they were doing that every game like the regular season. They weren't really. Like, it was really just basketball at that point in time, and they had some amazing players, so they won the game and they had the better but I actually think that whole thing of like, it's all just threes is like, in general, that is basketball, but it's not necessarily essentially the best way to win basketball. Like I say, to me, if you could have, because we started this with a Zion conversation, if that guy was healthy, mate, that would be like a top 5 player I'd build around in the NBA. Like, if you had that guy and some good 3-point shooters, that's game over there. So I actually think those teams, if you look, the floor on those teams, as much as we can criticize the stars of like Embiid, there's a reason everyone's shocked when these guys go out early in the playoffs, mate, because they should be a lock to pretty much be in the conference finals every year. Like, with the modern day, with some 3-point shooters, an up-paced team, and some of these guys, I think these guys have actually been, like you're saying, essentially, if everyone is doing 3-point shots, they become the obvious counter. You just have an amazing mid-range guy all day long, because they're also, we're picking, except for Zion, the oversized guys. You can't stop these guys. Like, you can't really stop them going to the basket. I also think it's still just a very reliable way to score the basketball. I think it's actually underrated. Just not as sexy, is it? That's the problem.
No. Well, mid range is like, there's just a flow to it that feels so aesthetically pleasing compared to a corner three, which a corner three has become so much less sexy to me lately, because it's just that everybody's just hunting it so much. And it's just like, also the problem is that corner 3-point shooters are usually like, they're basically just specialists at that role now. Like, there's some people where it's like, no joke, above 60% of their field goal attempts are just corner threes, because that's literally like, they're literally just 3-and-D archetypes that are just bred now to essentially come out of college, be good at that role. And as long as they aren't just like really screwing up on any other side of the ball, like on passing or just whatever, have some major deficiency outlier, they're just good. Like, that's it. That's their job. 6'6". If you're a 6'6" guy, like, if you're not practicing just playing like your lateral quickness for defense and just shooting corner threes, you're potentially missing out on like $50 million in your lifetime right now.
I've got one for you then. I'll borrow it. I'm not going to put that many modern day names forward, because I also think a lot of them are a bit overblown. And also, like I say, the defensive rules just pump people's stats up to a point that they're absolutely untenable. Right? This guy definitely has that too. But the eye test checks out like a motherfucker for this player. This is one of the rare young players I'll actually big up. And it is the guy from the Thunder, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, which is already like one of those Key and Peele NFL names. Like, they have some outrageous names in these American sports. Gilgeous-Alexander. That's already hilarious in itself, so we can enjoy that. And then 2, this guy is actually a fucking stud, mate. He actually looks really good.
He was second on my list here. Like, I have one guy under 25 that should probably make it into the top 100 above him. But yeah, I had him right there. Shai has been incredible for the Thunder. I mean, all-star too. And yeah, huge jump for him. What did you have to say? I got. Put it this way:
when you consider he plays for the Oklahoma Thunder and he plays point guard, mate, this is why I think your boy Westbrook's mad overrated. This guy's what people think Westbrook is, mate. This guy's fucking sick. This guy has the game. By the way, here's the problem Westbrook always had, is Westbrook must think he's a different player than he is, if you know what I mean. Like, he thinks he's like some sort of... my joke is, it's a mean joke, but I'll use it anyway. You know, when you play games like Dota or League, one thing that's a problem if you're not native to the game is, sometimes you get lost in the team fight and you think, oh shit, that's not my character. I always thought the joke is, Westbrook thinks he's Durant. Like, oh fuck, Well, I'm not him. Shit. Oh, fuck. My whole game would have made sense if that was me. Oh, fuck. I'm that little guy next to. Oh, what am I doing? Like, that's the gag, right? But like, this guy gets it though. This guy actually gets his whole skill set. Like, even though when you watch him play, he does look a bit like that Isaiah Thomas, like that guy that was on the Celtics, where he does look like a little short ass. But mate, he knows his fucking game exactly to a T. Like, he actually looks for real. Like, if you give this guy in the next 5 years. Look, he's not going to be the MVP of the league because he's just very rarely going to get that on a team like that. But he could easily be an all-first NBA player. His skill set looks really good, really good. I actually think this guy's actually underrated, if anything, Maui. How did he not get the same hype that some of these other fuckers do? Like, this guy should be hyped to the heavens. Surely his skill set's really good.
Small market player. That's
like, he can do everything, right? What can he do?
Yeah, well, he doesn't really shoot threes at a good rate. That's
a positive for me. That is a positive for me, as I've made quite clear.
you love that, yeah. But like, here are the Shai numbers that I got, which is that okay. First of all, last season 31 5-5 split. Like, that's absurd. Like, that many points per game. He only shoots 2.5 threes per game. Like, that's that's exceedingly low for like someone that's supposed to be a perimeter player. But I found this one stat which I freaking love about Shai, which is that only 11 people in the NBA shoot 20% or more of their field goals between 10 and 16 feet. So like a real mid-range shot. Shai has the highest field goal percentage in that range out of all of them. Like, he is the best from 10 to 16
By the way, think about that for
league.
a second. Tie that into what I said earlier about if you're making like a vision of how we're going to play basketball. So in an era, Maui, where everyone knows all my shooters are waiting to take a three-point shot the second I dish once I penetrate, or everyone else in the modern day can only go to the hoop. So they're either defending properly, but don't foul him at the hoop, or let him shoot for the thing. If you also can shoot the mid-range, you have the whole game sealed there. Like, essentially, you're going to have to be like a quarterback, basically. But if you can run the game properly with that skill set, you've just got the whole game solved. Like, how do they stop you? Like, your team just wins at that point.
Yeah, that's the thing, and like that's kind of the number that you're like aiming for as a team in order to like if he could do that infinite times per game, like you'd probably just win more games than you lose.
Can't lose. Yeah, basically, you can't lose.
Yeah, so that's amazing for him. I also what other ones did I find here? 88% of his shots though are 2-pointers, which like, but I also think like he makes up for some of that because he's actually like, I mean, he's a pretty good floor general. Like, I wouldn't say he's like commanding the most in terms of like respect, in terms of like finding crazy passing lanes, or like he doesn't obviously have like Jokic vision or anything like that, but like he's doing a pretty serviceable job. I think that the reason that like he's still like, to me, like such a player that seems to have a pretty strong likelihood even without the 3-point shot though, is just like the volume at which he can score at this level of efficiency for a guard is so high that it does break the mold of what modern NBA teams want from the point guard position, where they do just want a guy that can kind of like almost be a new Steph Curry, which let's just be honest, like no one's gonna be that. Like Trae Young is not that guy. Like that's no one is gonna, even if they want to attempt that, even if they want to take the hero bomb shots. Like, Shai's figured out what his game is early enough in his career where I think that he's now like really put himself in a position where he's very likely to actually like build upon that. So that's yeah, I think Shai is like a really good one that you brought up there. Yeah.
Okay, give me an then.
Yeah, I could keep going down the list. This is another like hipster pick. Like, this is probably a guy that, again, not many people are watching too closely, but I mostly just remember him because watching the last Warriors season, this guy just scorched the Warriors, and I was just pissed because I was like, who the hell is this? Started paying a little bit more attention to him. Tyrese Haliburton, 23 years old, 6'5" point guard for the Indiana Pacers. Like, what I hated about watching this guy when he was torching the Warriors was that his shot looks like what I do when I'm like, and I'm not good at basketball. It's like, it kind of looks like a push shot where he's kind of like releasing it almost like he's starting the ball like towards his chest, as opposed to that like really pristine Klay Thompson jumper where he's like instantly gets the ball above his head and does like the perfect release and everything like that. But he's really good for, in terms of numbers, 20 points, 4 rebounds, 10 assists. So all in all, better, like you would say he's probably the better, like typical point guard than someone like Shai. And he's shooting 40% from three on 7 attempts per game. So it's like above league wide average on 3-point percentage. And his field goal percentage, yeah, it takes a dip, but that's just because he's actually taking so many threes that your overall field goal percentage isn't going to be that great. And he also has the same amount of turnovers per game as Shai, but he has twice the amount of assists. So, like, in terms of actually being a really strong point guard, he's a guy that I actually think could be easily the second best player on a championship team. You probably want to put him next to like a really like a top 10 level center, or a top 10 in the league. I mean, like at the center or small forward position. But in terms of like being your second star for a team, I think he could easily be that guy within 3 years. Like, he might already be possibly that guy if you put him on the right sort of championship contender team. And one thing I love is that, like, he kind of also has these motions where he gets kind of like jerky sometimes, where it's just like he'll do like a really like heavy head fake, or like he'll like kind of swing the ball like he's about to pass it, and it fakes out defenders really nicely. And that could be partially due to the fact they don't know his tendencies yet, and so people are coming into like his like against him a little bit raw, or like they're not watching his footage as much as other people. But right now he's actually like he's got some of those fakes down pat. He does that little like cut dribble where you put spin on the dribble, so it fakes out the defender thinking you're going to go one way, but the spin of the ball actually takes it another direction. He has like all these little tricks up his sleeve, and you know, like compared to CS, like I kind of equate that to like having like a lot of one ways that in every situation, one way smokes, where you can just like drop this one and it creates a new situation that you're more familiar with than your opponent. So I think the way that he's able to just be a floor general and just kind of like create opportunities for him and his teammates with like dribble penetration, or also running it through the break, I find him to be really, really strong at that. And the fact that he's also a slightly oversized point guard at 6'5" is another reason. Like, this guy also, when he dials in on defense, like he looks very competent. Like, I don't know if he's ever going to win an all defense NBA thing, but you're never going to say this guy's in the bottom 100 defenders in the league.
The problem with this player is, first of all, like, obviously I don't watch a ton because he plays for the fucking Pacers, but I have seen him play, obviously. The main thing I would say this player has is this. He has two things. One's a positive, one's a negative, and they're both the same, because if people don't know, strengths and weaknesses tend to come sort of connected, which is, one, he is a fucking absurdly good three-point shooter, like you say. But as a result, I actually think, because he is like a true point guard, like he is like a fucking pass player, he should actually be more selfish. Bro, this guy could actually, for real, be more of a star if he wanted to be. Like, I mean, again, this is where it depends what team you put around. Like, on his team, I think he probably should shoot more threes, mate. He's even better. Like, but if you had him on like an actual best team, then probably be a great facilitator. So, like, I actually do think he's a very good player. I think that's the only issue for me, is like, I get the vibe that, like, the reason why he's so efficient at three is he is someone who's trying, like you say, to be the proper point guard, and then it's like he takes the three if it's there. But it's like, bro, you could force this. Like, you're actually an even better player than this. Like, it just shows how it's one of the things I find fascinating about team sports is it's not just what role you get assigned to. If you notice, there really are two types of player. There's the player who just does what they think the team needs, and there's the player that just does what's best for them. That really, and the mad thing is, it's not that you want one or the other. You sort of, in some ways, want one of the dickhead superstar ego guys, and then you want like the right mix of players around them that sort of bring out the team play aspect but still let them do their own thing. So to me, he's just right on the middle there. So put it this way, he won't be on like the NBA 100 list like we were saying earlier, because he probably just doesn't have the mindset for it. But he definitely is, out of the modern players, he definitely under the radar one, because here's the difference. Think about how rare what I've just said is. It's the other way around. Everyone else is the Trae Young fucker who's trying to take like 8 3-pointers a game, whether they hit it or not. Like, actually, in the modern day, this guy essentially, it's like I said about the Reggie Miller thing. It's like, if you look at his like stat line, it actually looks like, are you playing in the 90s or something? Why are you taking more threes, mate? You should probably take like 1.5 times more threes. You probably make them. Like, you're actually a fucking banger player.
Do you want to talk about Trae Young? I was thinking of including him on my list, but then I just couldn't.
If you notice, he is one of my go-tos, because to me, essentially, I'll really hurt everyone's feelings. I'm going to really hurt them right now. Yeah. To me, he's just the modern day Allen Iverson. And you know my feelings on that one. Like, look, here's the thing. If I am them, I get why they do it. It's like the Cadian angle that we always talk about in CSGO. Look, I'm sure you get it as well, Maui. If I actually thought I could win the major, and I can sort of low-key be the AWPA, the Star, the IGL, and win the major, why wouldn't I get it all then? Like, that's the dream for my ego. So I sort of low-key get why, if they think there's a chance they can do it. But my problem with people like Allen Iverson and Trae Young is this. You can do what you're doing now in your career, which is ball the fuck out and chuck every shot. But when your career is over, you will have the career that you and Allen Iverson had, which is, at best, you maybe had the odd individual accolade and you never got close to a championship and you never are going to be like an all-time great player. Or you can do what no one wants to do, which is sublimate your ego and probably be a sidekick to someone else and you'll win a bunch of rings. But these guys don't want to do that. And my problem, the reason why I picked Trae Young out especially, is because, one, he really, all that shit about Steph Curry, but the maths run out. The math doesn't check out on you taking that many threes, mate. I can tell you, you aren't Steph Curry. Let's just get that through. And then secondly, in the modern day, I do think that is the modern sickness, which is that I actually think some of these guys, for real, as long as they get paid $100 million, Maui, and they get to average 25 points, they don't really care if they win or lose, in my opinion. Like, they do in a way, like, I'm sure they're sad when they lose in the playoffs, but they're not like, sad enough to actually do something about it, if you know what I mean. And so, to me, he's just an example of someone where he's slightly overrated, and he's just like, what's wrong with the modern NBA, in my opinion, you know?
I can agree with a lot of that, because when I was making my list of people, I was kind of like names that came to mind, and when I was looking at the list of people that were under 25, like Trae Young was there actually. He's he's about to turn 25 in a few weeks or something like that, and when he was trending very well for a while, but it actually seems like in some ways he regressed this most recent year where, like, for example, Tyrese Haliburton actually made the All-Star team over Trae Young in the most recent NBA season. And when you look at just kind of like raw output numbers, you would have probably thought that Trae Young should have been there. But then in terms of actually efficiency, like, Haliburton's just got him beat on just about everything now. Like, the only things are like, Trae Young does score 6 more points per game than Haliburton, but like turnover wise, again, I'll just say like Trae Young has over 4 turnovers per game, and Haliburton, like I said, 2.5. Like it, and they have the same amount of assists per game. Like that's, so there's all these like little numbers where Haliburton just doesn't even edge him out. He actually beats him pretty handily on some of them in terms of mostly just efficiency and playing winning basketball. And the thing is, like you're saying, like, yes, if you can, the problem is like with the NBA, you can make a great contract for yourself if you do just score. If you put up like 25, 5, and 5, you're going to get a sick contract. Yes. You're going to be probably the face of your franchise. You're going to be like the local town hero. But like in terms of actually putting forward like the best effort and thinking about the game in a way where it's like commanding resources in CS:GO. It's like, oh, should I actually bait right now? Should I try to pounce on this timing, or should I just kind of play passively because I know that the fight's going to come easier to me, even though it might not work in the flow of the round, which is needed in order to actually win the round. And that's why, for example, I'm critical of people like Rob sometimes, where it's like you're taking so long in this round, you're taking so much of this time resource away from your team that you're not actually you're not achieving anything in the flow of the round in order to find anything. And that's kind of how I feel about Trae Young, where it's just that you're just jacking up some shots, you're trying to like shoot from the logo or something stupid like that, just so you can get your like little highlight for the game, so that your end of the season highlights is like 7 seconds longer. But like, I would rather have the player that's going deep into the playoffs, having better runs. And I think there's a little bit of like where I'd be interested in your opinion though is like you've made the statement before on other shows that it's like you would rather be the player that loses a playoff series but scores like 30 points per game, but you, as opposed to being the guy that wins it but scores like 10 points a game. And the thing is that like in a way I do agree with you, but also I think like recognizing your own limitations on an efficiency over a long stretch of time, or really in terms of just usage rate, I think is necessary to like mold yourself to be a championship level player, which is why like over the course of it, like you might look at the raw output numbers and Trae Young might beat Haliburton, but in terms of efficiency, that's why I take Haliburton.
I mean, I will say the context to that also is I'm talking about also if you're a fan of a player, because basically, like, spoiler, I'm just a fan of what people can do in the game. Like, why would I, like, essentially, the best analogy ever is the Kobe Bryant one, that game 7 against the Celtics where he had like a dog shit game, right? Because in that scenario, because I'm supposed to be like a fan of Kobe, I'm supposed to love that. Like, oh, they won. Like, there's a fucking terrible game. Like, I'm not actually like a fan of this guy. Like, I don't know him as a human. I haven't got a parasocial relationship. I'm a fan of his game. Like, I want to to see him make like a bunch of fucking fadeaway jump shots and you go in his bag and actually have a good game. Like, that's why I say I'm there to watch them play the game, not win or lose. It's a team sport. You can't actually decide as an individual if you really win or lose the game. So what I would do is I'll bring it over to this, because I'll give you another name, actually. I'll tell you one. This, technically, by your count, he's just missed the cut for this. But, like, this is a player where I do think there's a lot of, like, contentious opinion on him. I actually think Donovan Mitchell is a really interesting player. Because on the one hand, I can see some of the downsides. Like, I don't really know if he does play hard enough on defense. He is one of those players who is on a team at this point in time where he can, like we're talking about now, he can just sort of ball out. You're not going to get the blame. You're not going to win the championship, but at the same time, you're not going to get hated on because you scored your points. But the thing is, if you actually look, he's another person where what I like is he looks like he really understands his skill set mix. There's another person with quite a short, stocky body. But mate, first of all, for the size that he has really good athleticism. Like, it's a really fucking strong athletic ability. And then secondly, in terms of scoring, he is a fucking beast, mate. He is a really strong player in the NBA. I actually think this is a name that I can see why some people hate on him. Like, he's clearly not the best player in the NBA, but I think he actually goes a bit under the radar for me, man. I think this guy is really good.
Yeah, I think with Donovan Mitchell, it's that the position is just kind of like super loaded with players also, that he's rarely going to like come up in conversations for like the best guard or anything. So like that's something. He's also like, you say like his defense, like, I mean, his defense is kind of, he's just really small, actually. So it's hard for him to like really be super impactful. He's definitely a good player. Like, I would definitely put him in like the top 30 in the league right now. Yeah, I think I could safely put him in the top 30, but I wouldn't really like elevate him to, I wouldn't like, he's not a guy that I think of even necessarily for, it's like, this guy would be second best player championship team. I almost feel like you want someone a little bit better. It's almost like he needs to be like the third best player on a championship team for me to be like really sold on it. I don't really like think that with Donovan Mitchell that we're gonna see. I think he could blossom into like almost like a Mike Conley level character, where it's just like, okay, like we like maybe he does improve on defense a little bit, but like I'm just not really. I personally, I don't have strong feelings on Donovan Mitchell. He doesn't make me really feel one way or the other too strongly. I just like, when I see him play, I'm just like, yeah, this dude's really solid. Like, deserves to be talked about in like the top 10 point guards in the league. But I'm not really ever going to be like, he's not in elite company by any means for me. Okay.
Right, what about this then? Because the other thing as well, like I said, is that we should just do some names that play in the modern day. So I actually think that the ultimate litmus test is the following name, because it ties into so many things we're talking about, which is, for real, if you want the line in the sand in the modern NBA, no one else gets this one, because I've watched so many conversations of it. It's Damian Lillard. Yeah. Because there's only two ways it goes. They either think you do the skips type angle of like, well, Portland Trailblazers never did anything, and he just, shot a lot of basketballs, got a lot of money, he didn't. So you either think he's mad overrated and he's just essentially like a big fish in small pond, or, I mean, dude, he was one of the shocking ones that made that 75 list. Like, bro, 75 best players ever in the NBA. Like, exactly. But I do think he's right on the line. I think it's an interesting discussion. So where do you have this player?
I think my experience with Damian Lillard is super biased, because he was just every time for probably 4 seasons, it felt like every time Damian Lillard faced up against the Warriors, he was dropping 40 points. So I think Damian Lillard is a god. Like, I think
the joke is, for you especially, you should be hella biased, because essentially he's just torched the Warriors and Westbrook about 1 million times in his career. It's like you've got the best reverse POV highlights ever, essentially, from Snipe to Die, right?
And also, okay, to set the record straight for all the fans that are listening to this, I don't love Westbrook. I just had the one little thing with
you chose to put that on the mast of your ship.
I defended him one time.
Let it forever hang around your neck like an albatross.
Another thing about Damian Lillard is we're both from the same area code, actually. We're both from the East Bay of the Bay Area. So, we have the same first 3 numbers of our phone number. So, also, he's, in a way, he's like a local legend for me, too. So, there's a lot of reasons I actually love Damian Lillard. But it's because he was the best player on the Blazers for such a long time, we kind of know what his ceiling is as the guy for the team. And unfortunately with Damian Lillard, he's kind of in a lot of ways like a poor man's Steph Curry, where it's just like he does shoot a lot of he takes 11 he took like 11 threes per game last season. He was shooting them at a 37% rate, and like that's just simply worse than Steph. Like that's just simply worse in like all regards. He sometimes just kind of like it just sometimes feels like he doesn't always trust his teammates as much. The thing is that he has worse teammates than Steph too. So it's like when this keeps happening, like the discussion with Paul George to LeBron, where it's just like he's just living in the shadow of him, that's basically been Damian Lillard for me. Like he's, to me, also played worse defense than Steph. I feel like the thing is with Damian now, like where his career is at, where he's really hunting this trade to get to the Miami Heat, I think he's recognized that if he ever wants to get one ring in his career, he needs to join someone who can really be the man. And to me, outlining Butler as the man for you is a little bit, I think that's a little tenuous. I don't know if you can really actually look at Butler and say that guy's going to lead me to a championship. I think that it would be an upgrade at the point guard position for the Heat, but I don't actually think like Damian, Butler, like Harrow, I mean, like Adebayo. I don't know if that doesn't necessarily read as a championship lineup to me. So in the greater context of Damian's career, I think that at many times throughout his career, he's been deserving of I should look up how many like all NBA teams he has, but like he's probably had like a ton of them, but it was probably always like third NBA all NBA third team. I would have been surprised if he ever even got a second NBA all NBA team, but let me just check actually right now. All NBA, okay, actually he got it 4 times. So I'm a little bit shocked by that, but at the same time, like very good. Like I would say that if you gave me Donovan Mitchell's career and Damian Lillard's career, I think Damian Lillard is gonna decidedly finish better than him overall, like in terms of where they rank at the end of it, their whole careers.
The problem I have with this player is this. Like, I'll actually contrast it. One thing people always forget about this player, and this is what you should always say at the outset, is just go and look at what his stats are listed at for his body, Maui. He is listed as 6'2", 88 kilograms. Like, if people don't understand, for like me, if me and Maui are up there, obviously he's going to be taller than us and way stronger. For basketball, that's nothing. That is like Allen Iverson territory, where you're just a little guy in a world of giants. So when you consider that aspect, he's actually a phenomenal basketball player. It's actually outrageous how good he is at shooting, handling the ball, getting around people. In fact, even for his size, fairly strong player. But the problem I have is this. I actually think he does have his skill set pretty nailed. Like, he's not an inefficient player, like you said. His numbers are actually amazing. The problem is he has absolutely maxed his stats out playing for the Blazers. Like, the stats can't go anywhere. There's no extra shot for him to take. He's taking as many shots as he can. He's shooting as well as he can. He's passing as well as he can. My biggest problem with this player is this. There's 2 parts. One is, because I've seen his game completely maxed out, like he's essentially showed me like the skill test of what he can do. He can't get any better than this. So he's not the best player in the NBA. So in that sense, he is overrated a little bit. But I do think that like this is an example of a player where I don't hate staying on the Blazers. It's just that if you notice, it doesn't seem like any of the other big players want to play for the Blazers. That's my problem. Because to me, this guy, I even think that's why the angle of wanting to go to the Heat is so weird. Because it's like, bro, you don't need Jimmy Butler. Like that's essentially your position, you idiot. Like if I'm this guy, I'm just trying to pair with one of these fucking monster center and power forward players, mate. I want to play with Embiid. I want to play with fucking Giannis. Like, you put me with those guys, and that might be game over, mate. We might just win the champ. We might just seal it up completely. Because think about it, this guy already could pass like a motherfucker. He could shoot like a really, really well. People know that. Like, there's the other thing as well. This guy needs the fucking Kobe filter applied. Do you know one of the shittest things I see online, Maui, is like, I get why fans do like, I'm going to run the numbers and look on a stats page, but they just leave it there. They just get the number and they just leave it without watching it. You know, when people talk about like the shooting efficiency of players, like, people like Kobe Bryant, you can't even just look at the field goal percentage, because if you've ever watched a Lakers game, you know he took every single 2 seconds left on the shot clock shot ever in his team. Like, essentially, when someone like Kobe only gets 44% field goal, but is taking every bad shot that his team had, that's way better than that's an amazing 44%. It's not like he was just taking mad cynical like 10 shots a game and picking his out. It's not like he's only taking the corner 3 like we're talking about. Like, you know, the these players, if they wanted to, could sex the number up, guys, and make the run. Remember, in their scenario, most of them, because they're volume players, they're saying, I'll take the points over the efficiency, essentially. So my problem basically is, there's a bit of that in Damian Lillard as well. Like, he's actually underrated in that regard. Like, he has these numbers, and he is showing it from the logo. Like that, you should be even lower if you're doing that. So I do think he is absurdly talented. Essentially, my problem is, he's a bit like Kawhi. He's got a terrible taste in what to do with his career. He's got a really bad idea of, like, what sort of team he should be on, or who he should win. Because I do think if you put him with the right players, he can win. The key thing is, though, it'd probably be the second option. You know what I mean?
With Lillard, two things I want to address. One is that when it comes to like career decisions, I think he just kind of followed the Kobe and Jordan blueprint of just, you stay with the whole team. If you stay with the whole team or with the same team for your whole career, no one can really fault you for it.
Can they?
But the thing is that also, at the end of the day, you are also judged by your team's accomplishments, even if you wish it were just solo accomplishments. And in terms of solo accomplishments, he's done very well for himself. But it's just that if he had looked for a trade a little bit more ambitiously earlier on, like if he were more forward with his request there, he could have probably actually played for a team that made it to the finals at some point. Like, think of like how badly a Celtics team or something like that could have wanted a player like this. Like, it would have been really sick to have another perimeter threat for them, even if he's not playing the best defense, because the rest of the team's going to cover him. So like, if it were him for Marcus Smart, I would have been pretty scared for the Warriors actually two NBA finals ago, like, because Marcus Smart just wasn't really much of a threat. He wasn't the best facilitator, and yet you had Tatum and Brown who were popping off on their own. If you just had one more threat, like, that Celtics team could have probably won the championship outright. So that's where it's like, you wish he did a little bit more. But like, the second thing I want to address with Lillard that is so sick about him, clutch factor. Like, obviously not necessarily the metric you should be propping up first, second, third, fourth, fifth, even sixth in your GOAT discussions. But if there's anybody that's got it, it's Lillard. 2 playoff winning buzzer beaters in his career, like, and both of them like ridiculous shots, like running full speed to like find an outside shot off of an inbound pass over the Rockets, and then the other one basically from the logo over Paul George to also send the Thunder home that time. Like, those are shots that again are like just etched into our brains for this guy's career, and why we'll probably elevate him over the long term in terms of his greatness, because I actually think that he's already, let's just Actually, this is a fun one. It's just like, between Lillard and Reggie Miller, I'm taking Lillard's career all day. Like Lillard to me has been the better player overall. It's just that, like, again, like, Lillard has now achieved a few all NBA second teams. Reggie Miller has not. Like, so if I'm anyone, and also Lillard just has better handle. He could create his own shot a little bit better. And I think Miller probably had better teammates. So like, in terms of some of like their career success, pretty equal in terms of team achievement. And yet, to me, Lillard's just the better player.
I'll also say as well, I do agree, the most obvious knock is that he's just not a great defensive player. And I do think, by the way, it's not just an old like throwback sentiment. If you're playing the perimeter, it is a fucking defensive position, for fuck's sake. Like, obviously both sets have their own style, like the fucking forwards have all the fucking interior defense. But like, in my opinion, you have to play some defense. But at the same time, I can give him like a slight pass in that he is 6'2", 88 kilograms. Like, one of the things about basketball is it really is cynical in that sense. Like, it's a game about being tall and weighing a lot of fucking weight, because then you can like use your weight against someone, then you can use your height against. Essentially, he's playing at disadvantage. So the reason why I actually graded him like against Allen Iverson is, the difference is Allen Iverson really did chuck. This guy, like, he actually makes the shots, mate. Like, I have no problem at all if he can make it the clip this guy can. My biggest issue, like I said, is I think he should have done some different choices in his career. Like, the mistake he also made was thinking that it is also like the old school NBA. Because here's the other flaw that they have, I think you just stay in one spot and then they build around you, is one, for whatever reason, people, I assume culturally, just don't want to go to Portland, mate. They've shown that over the last 30, 40 years. It just is the case. So already you're not getting the people attracted to you. And then secondly, the part they miss about that is everyone else doesn't do that meta. It's not just the stars. Even lesser players go somewhere else every few years, Maui. So the other part you're missing there is, not only did people not move around a lot, but the teammates didn't either. So you keep the same core together for like 9 years, and then you bring in the one big star, and then that's like the season where you win the championship. That doesn't really exist anymore. Like, you're always playing musical chairs in most of the positions on your roster. So the real issue there is, it's not as simple as like, well, I just waited and sort of, no, what you're essentially doing there, if we had to phrase it and verbalize it, is you trusted your GM. And in this case, you picked the wrong GM to do it with, mate. Like, the difference is, if you played for certain teams like the Heat or something, you could trust your GM then, mate. They've rebuilt it like 3 or 4 times. Like, your GM just basically stuck with you. And then the worst thing they've done is this as well. This is one thing that really pisses me off. Is obviously the reason he's asking for the trade now is because he's 32 years old. Like, he knows now he's got a very short window left. And this is basically his last chance at either a mega contract stay in the Pacers, the Portland Trailblazers, or you get the one last big run elsewhere and you try and win 2 or 3 rings, right? The problem with that is you've undercut the whole storyline. You were trying to do it Dirk Nowitzki style and stay and maybe win the 1 ring at Portland. That would be enough, by the way, because if you did that, people, as long as you commit to that storyline, at the end, people will sort of do like with Dirk and go, well, you didn't go anywhere though. That's the key thing. You did sort of keep the faith, and in the end, you got 1. So we'll sort of say your 1's worth like 2, basically, and you can just chill. Because he's not done that, and at the end, he's going to potentially now go and try and just like, not ring chase, because he's going to be a good player if he does it, but going to just now try and go and join a team that's already been there and win. It will ruin his career narrative, unfortunately. Like, now it'll just be remembered as like, yeah, but didn't he just win because he joined another team? It's like, so now you you haven't been enough of one or the other to me there, you know?
Yeah, the problem is that he was like always the first option, but now he's gonna be the second option, and then like you're right. It's kind of like, it is in some ways kind of like Dupree to device, where it's just like, you're not really going to put him in like contender status or anything like that. It's just, but it also is kind of like, there is a satisfaction so many of these players have by just getting a ring. Like, it's that talk that they have, like, when they're sitting on their porch, like 10 years later, you know, it's like,
the problem is though, that's just because I'm not there, mate, because like I say, it's like the Nico winning Katowice one. I'd just be like, you didn't really win Katowice though, mate, did you? Like, you won Cologne. I don't know about Katowice. Because that almost needs to happen. Like, because, you know, I've always wondered that, by the way. That's why, in my opinion, like I say, I'd rather just ball out and play the worst I can and do what I can in my career. Because to me, it's like, Surely, if you're actually honest with yourself, unless you are like an actual, like, bona fide, like, first ballot Hall of Famer, the best player on your team, you carried all the games, surely part of you looks in the mirror and goes, has anything changed? I just put a ring on my finger now, isn't that it? Like, and I actually just, like, I'm not actually any better because I put the ring on, you know what I mean? Like, surely, the joke should be it's what you had to do to get the ring, surely that's the impressive part, but I feel like everyone gets the horse before the cart on that one, the cart before the horse, I guess, the analogy. Yeah, but I've got one for you, I'll spin it another way, because we'll also do somewhere, it's like modern day players, like this player, I referenced him earlier, but he's almost retired now, obviously Chris Paul. Mate, I actually think this is an example of a player where who you are as a person, like, overpowers who you are as a player. Because I actually do despise Chris Paul as a person.
I hate Chris Paul.
Like, genuinely, here's the thing, right? I don't even mind people being dirty, Maui. But being dirty to me it could just be being physical. This guy is just flat out dirty. Like, I have, for real, with my own eyes, seen this guy try to punch people in the balls about 5 times. Like, in my opinion, by the way, that's like instant, like, tossed out the game, potentially even suspension. Like, that's actually outrageous you do that. Or kick people, pull them, or punch them. And actually one of the dirtiest players ever. But if you take that aspect aside, because that's only part of the game, obviously, he is a really fucking good player, though. Like, I actually think that whole thing everyone does about it, he just chokes in the play. There's one thing I find weird. I want to throw that to you. Dude, I don't even get that angle. I genuinely don't. Look, his teams certainly have choked. His teams have, Maui. I don't even personally think Chris Paul's that much of a choker. I think he's actually a pretty good player in the clutch. Yeah, for me, I'll say it like I did with Damian Lillard. He's about fucking 4'1", weighing like 10 pounds, soaking weight. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think people get how tough these guys are. People like Chris Paul, mate, this guy fucking going the lines dead all day long, gets head smashed and going for a layup. Like, I think he's a really good player. I get that he's a dickhead as a human, seemingly, but a mega basketball player, in my opinion.
I mean, Chris Paul was like easily gonna be on that 75th anniversary.
He's a lock
team.
for
like,
me, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he was like, he was the best point guard in the league for maybe like 5 years or so. Like, there was like, I don't think anybody has doubts about his individual greatness, or I would hope not, but like, I definitely don't. And even though he's kind of like trailed off in the last 4-ish years, where it does feel like, he's been a little bit choky with like the Rockets lost to the Warriors, for example. Like, it's not like Chris Paul always is, even like he never really designed his game to be that guy all the time. He's an incredible distributor and even longer than when he was the best point guard in the league. He was probably the best distributor in the league. Like his assists were just mega. Like you would always see these crazy passing lanes. Also could just keep it really simple. Like I always felt like he was barely ever turning the ball over. He was just so consistent with just like making sure he takes care of it. Like if you were running your offense through Chris Paul, it felt like you could run so many different schemes, so many different styles, and you would still find a way to, like, one, he would get a lot of assists, and two, he would actually like have a way of creating his own shot. Like what was really sick about him is that if he doesn't see anything, he was so sick at the mid range, just creating a little bit of space with a little bit of a bump, and then just taking like a little like semi fade away, and that's it. And for a guy like you're saying that I think listed at 6 feet tall, that's like so difficult when people are like 8 inches taller than you. Like if you've ever played basketball against someone that's 8 inches taller than you, it almost feels like you can't do anything. It really like for
here's what they don't
humans,
get. They don't get that unless you have some god's ear handle. They just never fucking jump it. They just stand over you like this all day long. Yeah. You can never get the ball off, can you? Like what can you do?
You need to be so much faster, so much craftier to even like get a shot off, especially finishing inside. It's just impossible because they could just basically stand under the basket and they can just kind of watch you try to like pull some move.
And by the way, this is another player. That's why I brought him up, who I'm thinking of when I talk about. Like they can just go and do like a teardrop basket anytime they want in the game. Yeah. Anytime.
Yeah, I think Chris Paul, when I was looking up those mid-range stats for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, like I think Chris Paul was like right behind him. Like that, sense. And again, and he's like a 6-foot point guard now. I will have to accept Chris Paul as an individual because he's now playing for the Warriors, but like at the same time, what you're saying about him being a dirty player has just like really besmirched his reputation for me, because I can't really look at this guy in the same light. And like, there's just like levels to it. Like sometimes when it looks like it's more incidental contact, like I've had like some levels of cope with people like Draymond Green and Zaza Pachulia, where it's like okay, that looked a little bit suspect, but it's also at the same time like that could be excused. But literally, like that's because it's like with their legs, like leg control is just flat out more difficult than hand control. And when Chris Paul is, no joke, making a fist, driving it into someone's ball sack, I know what's going on there. Like there is no excuse for that.
Yeah,
it is literally like just so like if we were in like American court and we're like, is this manslaughter, 3rd degree, 2nd degree? This is 1st degree premeditated ball smacking that Chris Paul is doing to some of these other players. Like it's so you can't like the guy for that. Like there's like liking a guy's game also, and then liking the dirty, like oh god. I for one do not like Chris Paul, but I do have to respect what he was producing as an individual player. I do have to, in some ways, also separate the man from the dirty plays. It's like usually I get to like separate the art from the artist, and I guess I have to do that. Even though what's fucked up is that Chris Paul's actually creating some of this like what I have to separate from him as an artist is stuff he's actually doing in the game, which are dirty plays. So it's like it's really hard. It's really difficult.
I mean, it's the same as the shit with like LeBron when it just flops or whatever. It's like, this makes it so much harder to actually care about what you're doing, mate. Like, technically, the rest of your game's great, but this is whack as fuck. No, the other thing as well about the Chris Paul angle is, like, I'll give you the best example ever, because that's one thing I've never got. Is like, it took quite a while before the momentum of like the negative PR really hit Chris Paul, because they were trying for a long time, because he was obviously on that dog shit Pelicans team, to like set him up like, oh no, like, you know, he's a great player and an all-star, which he is. But like, the best analogy ever would be this. You know, when his kid comes to all those press conferences, and cause it's a little kid like Chris Paul Jr. or whatever, everyone's like, oh, it's like even his kid is a dickhead. Like, have you ever seen his kid in those press conferences? He's just grabbing the mic all to talk. It's like, shut the fuck up. We're not here for you. So the joke is like, it just must be in his fucking genetic tree or whatever, mate. They're just arseholes. Like, even though he is a mega player though. That's the problem. To bring it all back, like, I actually do think for real, cause he hasn't got a ring and now probably never will have one, I think he actually is, for real, one of the more transcendent players of like this couple of generations. He is, like you say, in your brain, if you watched him play enough, you can picture a million examples of him using his handle, just penetrating, stopping like 2 feet from the basket, separate from the defender and just make a perfect like mid-range jump shot. That is one of the most unguardable NBA moves. And again, like with the Damian Lillard one, if you're like 6 foot tall, mate, the skill you have to get up and to do that and then hit the shot is mega. Like, it's so much different to be Kevin Durant and do that over the guy. Like, you know what I mean? You're never guarded in that scenario. This guy, the joke is like, if you're these people, it feels like you're guarded all the time except the moment you get the shot off. It's actually mega impressive.
It's so funny, actually. If you actually just put Kevin Durant's bag in Chris Paul's body, that dude would suck ass. Like he'd just do pull-up jumpers. Like, what are you even doing? Like, you're just gonna get your shit kicked in every single time. I have 3 more names, and we could breeze over. If you want to like go over one of them quickly, we can, because I think the last one's gonna be like still a big discussion. But the third, this guy I ranked 4th for my like likely to make it guys to the top 100. Because we already covered Shai for that matter, is 21-year-old shooting guard for the Timberwolves, Anthony Edwards. This guy, to me, is just like bona fide. Like, he tries to take over games. He had, like, I looked at his numbers in terms of just like, well, his measurements. He's 3 inches taller than Trae Young, who looks like a dwarf when he's on the NBA court. Like, Trae Young looks so small out there. But Anthony Edwards is 60 pounds heavier and 3 inches taller, and he's like a bull in a freaking china shop. Like, he's like a bowling ball, and he's just knocking over pins sometimes as he makes his way to the hoop, and it's so pleasing to see. It's not to the level of Zion where he can just like bounce anybody off of his body, but he's kind of in a way almost like gives me a little bit that same feeling, but he's a better outside player. He has a 37% 3-point shot for his numbers last season. He was 24, 6, and 4. And again, this was 37% 3-point shooting, but he took over 7 threes per game. Like his like in terms of attempts, that's probably actually even too high. I bet if he took 5 threes per game, just did a little bit better on shot selection, he could probably get that number up to 40%. And then you would actually say to yourself, okay, this guy could be a contributing member to a championship level team, and he's 21. Like, that's where it's so crazy to me. Like, he's so young, and he's putting up this volume at a pretty decent clip, above also 50% on 2-point shots. And the thing is that his defense is also kind of in a similar vein to Zion to me, where it doesn't always feel like he's like really focusing on his assignment. And it does feel like with that level of athleticism, he should be doing a little bit more. And again, this is probably why he doesn't need to be as much of a volume shooter, because with people like Harden, when they actually, you know, because they focus so much of their efforts on offense, they sometimes just give themselves a pass on defense. And I do think that is egregious, because this is a game where you should actually measure your ability and your stamina so that you can contribute. Because if you're just a free bucket, if you're a revolving door on the other side, then what's good of your bucket if you're just going to give a bucket up to the other guy? So I think that he needs to probably focus a little bit more, or just focus on conditioning. But again, like 21 years old, I think he has a lot of room to grow on that side of the ball. And he also probably, in terms of like outside the game stuff, at the end of the last season when he just came off the floor frustrated, and he grabbed that folding chair and he kind of spun it around and hit these 2 women that were standing by the exit gate. Like, Bert just needs to calm down with incidents like that. When you watch that footage back, it actually doesn't look like he was intentionally trying to hurt anybody, but it is also like knowing that you're a dude that's like 6'4" or 6'5" and like 250 pounds, that if you fling a chair around and you hit a civilian, it's going to look really bad. So if he just kind of like reels it in a little bit in terms of temper, as you assume someone would when they're 21, as they usually people are likely to mature, then I think this guy could definitely be a contributing player. It's hard to say for certain if he's ever going to be that guy on a team, but the thing is that when a lot of people win their championships is when they're like 28 through 32, if they're that guy. So it's like, man, he has a lot of opportunity to become that guy.
Yeah, basically, Maui could easily have put this at the beginning like he did with the first player. Like, obviously, he's very, very, very young in his career, this player. And also, like, this is why it's a good pick. He also plays for a smaller market team that no one cares about, etc. So the real problem is jury's just out on him. Like, I do agree. As like a shooting guard talent, there aren't actually many like traditional shooters. Like, he's up there for sure. The main issue, obviously, is like you actually... like basically one of the biggest problems the NBA has, to tie it back to what we were talking about earlier, is it is the ultimate sport. Counter-Strike and esport is also the analogy. It is the ultimate sport to essentially frag out as a good player on a bad team, basically, on ball out in this particular case. Like, so the real problem is the numbers alone can never tell you. Like, it's the ultimate sport for the eye test. Why I always say the same thing with Counter-Strike. Like, I don't really care what the fucking number says, mate. Like, there's certain players for real are fugazi. You go look at the game and it just isn't as good. This guy is pretty good, though. I agree the potential's there. Right, one thing I do want to bring it up, though, it ties into a couple of things we're discussing here, is you notice on the other sickness of the modern age is because everyone is just getting to shoot 20 shots a game and 8 3-pointers. It's like you say, they treat it like it's a 3-point shooting contest, and it's your turn, right? Here's mine. Oh, I made one. Did you make one? No. Like, one of the core principles of basketball, it's one of the things that makes it a unique sport, is it's not like the NFL where the offense doesn't play on the same field as the defense. Like, you are on defense as well. Like, that's why people don't get it. When we're talking about some of these players, like, they don't play much defense, they still there, though. It's not like the coach takes them out. They're just not doing anything. And the sickness of the modern age is star players who just don't play defense or don't try hard enough. And the reason why that does suck to me is because beyond people like Kawhi who have like physical advantages, most defense is just things like being a team player, hustling, understanding the scheme, like cutting people's angles off. Essentially, it's just effort. It really is just hustle. And so the reason that pisses me off is because, in my opinion, the ones who can play defense, first of all, they already make themselves just like that much better a player. But it nearly always is the factor that holds one of these guys back. Like, I brought it up many times for LeBron, but I think it's really whack. Like, you said it earlier, the best way. The real way you think of it isn't like, right, well, I've scored a basket. If you score a basket, I'll score another one. No. The winner's mentality is like, I'm going to score mine and then stop you. That's how I win. Because think about what people don't get is people think defense is like non-egotistical, right? You can make it egotistical if you want. Think about what an insane ego pump you'll get if every time I score, I then bust your ass and you don't score. Like, dude, now I am the reason I'm winning the game. I'm the plus minus right here. Like, I actually think you can even build it in like a healthy way, because some of these talents, it's why if you notice at the beginning, a lot of people probably thought I overrated Paul George. Bro, the players we're talking about in this episode, he will actively try to shut down. I respect that. I have mad respect for that in the modern day. I hate when some of these other, like, the difference is Damian Lillard is just watching you take your three and then coming down and trying to shoot his, you know, because he just can't, he doesn't have the skill set Paul George does to lock you down. So I do think defense is an aspect that, like, is mad underrated in that respect, and people don't give the respect to the really good players. But then one other thing I'll tie in is this. Well, maybe we'll do a future episode like this, because I think another cool angle we could do in the off season is think up like narratives that we disagree with or whatever, and we'll like address them. But I'll give you a quick aside thing here, because one thing people need for terminology is, I actually took this from the NFL subreddit, but you might notice me and Monty use this all the time now. What they do is, you know, I always call fans like plebs or fans or stands. What they do on the NFL subreddit is mega. They call them nephews, right? Because what they found, and you'll have seen this is a nightmare in the NBA on Twitter now, is there's just a generation of people who didn't watch these players play the game. They're just on Wikipedias. And all they're doing, it's like, I'll give everyone in CSGO a slight joke here because he's not going to watch the episode. Like, the joke is, here's the analogy for you, right? We all just saw Zero do nothing and get eliminated from IEM Cologne, and it looked really whack in the third game. But Maniac thinks if he spends a week on a fucking CIA black site torturing the stats, that eventually they'll tell him, like, nah, actually, Zero did carry that game. You were wrong. Your lying eyes were wrong. And in fact, look, please, he just comes out all fucked up. Please, the stats just come out all like blood. Please, I'm an American citizen. Please, shut up. Sit. Read the paper. See who did carry the game. You know what I mean? Like, they're all trying to do that, though. So the reason why we call them nephews is because they're like trying to argue from a wiki with like what we saw, and they're not really like, they don't really know what they're talking about. So one thing I do here, this isn't that connected to this episode, but I do want to bring it up on this one, is one of the ones that made me actually want to make side channel / non-esports content about basketball, Maui, was some of the nephew angles, because they're just looking at stats. They're so far off, it's mad. So I'll bring one up, right, an angle that they do right now, and I'll see what you think of it. Did you see, this was only like, I think about a year or 2 years ago, because he's an NBA pundit, they all donked and laughed at Paul Pierce because Paul Pierce implied he thought he was better than Dwayne Wade. Now, here's what's mad about that. To them, that was they didn't even consider this premise, Maui. To them, it was so laughable of a premise that Paul Pierce is just an idiot who should never saw. Like, how dare he compare himself to Dwayne Wade? The craziest thing about that to me is like, bro, that's a great conversation. What are you talking about? Like, those are two, by the way, really good players. But they are quite similar, like obviously different positions, but quite similar, like skill set. Same era of basketball, by the way. Like, I actually think that's like a banger convo. Like, to me, that's a pick me. You know, like I could go either way on that one. I think they're both mega players. So to me, what that showed me was like, bro, if that's what people are getting from these wikis, like you're just never going to get the game because, mate, Paul Pierce had a fucking phenomenal bag. Like, if people don't know. The joke is, the reason why at the end of his career he was still good, this guy, his whole career had the old man bag. You know, the fucking skill set at the park where, like, they have every, like, one little drop step, like a shimmy move. And it's like, they never have to use athleticism to beat you. They just shake you out your boots. They have the amazing, like, fucking 16-foot jump shot or whatever. Like, I thought, like, that's one of those ones where, to me, that just showed, you're telling yourself as a nephew there. If you think that's not even a conversation that we're going to be had, it's like, I think you only watched him when he was on the fucking nets or something at the end, bro. Like, Paul Pierce was a killer, bro. Paul Pierce was really good.
I would rank them like probably within like my all-time list or something like that. Probably within like 30 places or something like. And like when it's that, like sometimes you're in some ways like splitting hairs over like personal achievement, team achievement, things like that. I would say like the thing is that like. To me, prime Dwayne Wade, I remember like more vividly in terms of like what he was able to do in terms of athleticism and the like variety of ways he was able to score. But in some ways, actually, when I think of Paul Pierce, it's like kind of more a little, almost more like skill, whereas Dwayne Wade was a little bit more force. And the thing is, you have to like take both, and it's almost like you could kind of just have a preference for which player you liked more.
Sure.
I'd still like if I try to look at it with like everything they did in their careers, I'd take Wade's career over Pierce's, but it's by no means like a close and shut case. Like I think they could be pretty close, actually. I really do think they could be close. I think Pierce might actually be the better defender. So in some ways, you actually might even I wouldn't mind taking him. Like if you want to consider.
Like I say, it's one of those ones, dude, where the joke is they immediately dismissed it. The more you think about it, the better in a convo it actually becomes.
Yeah.
I'll give you another factor that's mega underrated, dude. Paul Pierce, probably one of the most underrated clutch players of all time. Mate, how many fucking playoff shots did this guy hit? A lot. This is a guy who's put a lot of fucking shots up, like big game 5s, game 6s, like the last game winner. Like, fucking mega player, mate.
Yeah.
It just shows, like I said, though, in the modern day, the other thing that the nephews are doing, you notice, is because he was on TV and had the audacity to say it, they also do that thing which is whack, which is, you know, all that shit of like all the stuff the Zoomers spam. It would actually be funny in context. Like, I'll give you an example. If, like, for example, you know, I'll give you one from the major. You know, when there was that whole thing where it was like, Warro 2K had like that beef against Simple when Monty played against him from that trash talk, right? If Simple said to Warro 2K, hey, little bro, calm down, you are not on my level, that'd be funny. But the problem in the modern days, the nephew is like a 14-year-old kid, and he'll be saying that to like Paul Pierce, like, hey, little bro, calm down. Dwayne Wade don't even know you, bro. It's like, what is this? Like, you've completely socially misaligned your trash talk. It doesn't even work. And also, by the way, there's another thing. If you're going to talk shit on him, you know Paul Pierce is a mega trash talker as well. Like, this guy's a killer in the game, mate. Like, this is why people have got to stop that thing of like, you might find it funny, for example, that someone failed. Like, I'm mocking Zero. I don't actually think Zero sucks. What are you talking about? Like, so when they actually dismiss the players' like ability, that drives me crazy, mate. Because it's like we're talking about with Chris Paul. You might think he's a dickhead as a person. He's a mega fucking point guard. Like, he is a killer at the game. So to me, that's just an example. Like, maybe we'll do a future episode like that where we'll try and pick out a bunch of big narratives that like we think are whack or they're misaligned or people just have like terrible references or whatever, you know.
Yeah. That's a good idea. Let me
go on. Give me another one.
I got two more guys, and I think they're both fairly polarizing in terms of how they're perceived. But this guy is one where literally, if I know that there's a Grizzlies game, I just turn it on because I need to watch as much Ja Morant as humanly possible. Like, this guy is like the body control.
Here's the problem. This is just where working desks has ruined me, Monty. Sorry, Maui. This is where, you know how many temptations I have to be like, you know what? Born shooter. You know, all that, you can't. It's too easy to go with all those shit jokes, isn't it? Like, come on.
Yeah. Natural born killer.
No, exactly. Exactly.
MBK.
Yeah. Listen, he'll shoot. He doesn't even need the green light. You know what I mean? Like all that shit. All the fucking desk lines have gone.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, okay, we're like,
because by the way, this guy definitely has some smoothie in him. He's his own worst enemy completely, in I know.
Exactly. I actually wanted to put him above Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and then I was like, well, I feel like I don't know if you have your act together outside the game, which is where like, so Ja Morant finished like third on mine. I had him above Anthony Edwards in this list for me, and like last season.
And by the way, we didn't go into it, but if you've ever looked it up, I don't even want to bring this up because it has no place in a historical basketball show. But if you just want to read some really cringe, really disappointing shit, just go and read up some of the Zion Spartan scandal stuff as well, like. It's one thing. Here's the problem, Maui. It's one thing if the scandals, like, it can sound cool if it's like, wow, you know, you fucked a bunch of like hot women or whatever. Theirs is like just the women just giving you all the details. Like, yeah, then you came and you didn't even call me next day. Like, no, I don't want to know this. Like, fuck, get this shit off the screen. Like, it's all sad when all these players do that because obviously that's like media stuff has somewhat like impinged on their careers now.
That's what. Yeah, but that's like the double-edged sword of being like someone that's frequently talked about in the media for like your extracurricular contributions is where like Ja Morant can also in some ways like needlessly enter like an MVP conversation because it's like, oh, look how he turned his career. Because if he gets his act together, he's already one of the most exciting players in the league by far. And so if he's able to actually just like do away with all of the outside drama and just focus on the game entirely, and let's say he comes back next season, he scores like 4 more points per game, like lowers his turnovers or something like that. Like people are gonna just start being like the people and fans love adversity. If they see that you overcame your demons to focus on your craft, people eat that up. And sometimes it almost needlessly inserts you into a conversation that you had no business entering by just objective metrics. And so for Ja Morant, that to me is where actually he could really get it together because one, he's only 23 years old. Like he's making mistakes as he's pretty young in his career. And like I'm saying, I think a person should really kind of like have figured their game out by 27 because you should be like at your peak of powers at like 28 to 31. And so, yeah, he has a few more years to figure things out for himself outside of the game. And with his numbers already, he's 26, 6 and 8, but like, he was also like trying to will his team into some of those games. And like what's weird about the Grizzlies is actually there was a stat at one point in the season where it's like games that they missed with Ja Morant, they had the exact same win percentage, if not better at one point in time than with Ja Morant, which is actually very damning.
That's wild,
yeah. Which is really, really damning to his case as like a great player. But like we all know what we're seeing when we do watch him, but that's I forgot there's like a term. Oh, the like I think Bill Simmons coined it called like the Ewing effect. But then someone actually kind of like disproved the Ewing effect in some way. Either way, like that's one of those things where it's like I'm not sure what to make of it when your team can do just as well when you're off the floor as on the floor. So there's like a few concerns with Ja Morant's career, but in terms of just like sheer athleticism and body control, like once he's in the air, there's very few people that are better than him and as explosive as him. And he's almost like also deceivingly short because Ja Morant himself is, let me see, what is his height actually?
It says 6'3" on Basketball Reference.
Yeah, 6'3", but he like somehow it seems like he carries himself and like the way he
looks
his
a lot
hops
like
make
he looks
his hops make it feel like he's like 6'6" or something like that. Yeah. So the athleticism probably is what really makes that feel where it is. But I think Ja Morant to me is just like super, super exciting. One of those players that probably will transcend the game in terms of like fan appeal just because he's like such a distinct style. But in terms of actual productivity, efficiency, getting it all together, I draw some concerns.
Yeah, the problem is obviously one, all the shit he's doing outside of the fucking court might just kill his career dead, / mean he's like no one wants to touch him. He'll be semi-blacklisted in the industry. And so that's a major concern. If you just look at his game though, he is mega. Like the key thing I would say is he's probably one of the most exciting players in the entire NBA to watch. Like I do think he is one of those guys. This is an example, by the way, of a guy who should take less 3-point shots. Like you're not some shit. I know everyone who's a perimeter player now thinks they're Steph Curry. You're not. Like the joke as well, by the way, you've got a really good mid-range game. You're good at attacking the basket. Go for that. Just stick to that game. Like that will serve you so much better. You're not the like volume 3-point shooter that you want to be. But then the other thing as well with this player is the reason why I can see why he's so popular is he actually does have some like Westbrook in him. What people like is he's mega aggressive attacking the basket. He does it with like fucking ego. The problem I have, though, is I actually also think similarly he has a little bit too much ego in some ways. Like, people will have seen some of the things that, like, look, you can chalk it up to, like, youthful naivety, but this isn't a joke. You can go look this up, guys. This guy has actually, and he wasn't doing it tongue-in-cheek, he thinks he would beat Michael Jordan. That's a real... You can go look that up. He thinks he is better. Now, I know the logic there is like, but whatever, I'm like 23 in my prime and the physical... It's like, no, but there's a level of self-delusion involved in that isn't as simple as when the fan tells me like, yeah, but Thorin, to be a good player, you've got to believe... No, here's the difference. Believing in your mind quietly that you would win and always you've got a chance is very different from saying in a microphone, I am the greatest basketball player out. Like, do you not see the difference between those two there? Like, because the stupid thing is, like, you can believe it in your mind, but still, like, act in a way that you're a good teammate, or you understand you have to give the ball. Like, for me, this guy, I think, my concern basically is he might go too much down the bus for Westbrook one.
Yes.
If he becomes a bit too egotistical and too, like, selfish that way, the problem with those players is they're right on the line. They could maybe be the best player on the championship team, but you probably want other good players around them. You know what I mean? Like, the real issue is when you do that whole, like, when you want people to have the big ego and be the superstar carry, the real problem is there's usually only about 5 people that should apply to, if you know what I mean. Most other people, it's why people coach team first. Most other people, it's more like you just want to get onto a good teammate. Like, it's why I keep saying, like I did on the past episode, I personally don't think there's anything wrong with that Celtics roster, mate. I think it's a fucking amazingly GM team with loads of skilled players. It's really deep. They're all young. The core could play together for years. That's the sort of team you want to make. The problem I have is I get the vibe. It's not yet because he's obviously so young in his career, but get ready. Here's my prediction. In 2 years from now, Maui, if he hasn't completely tanked his career with all this gun shit and this gang shit and this extra, I guarantee this guy will start doing stupid super team shit where he's trying to make like a team. It'll be like him and 2 other guys and trying to go, because that's the one concern I have. Basically, if this guy could just shut the fuck up and play basketball, he could be really good. Could be really good.
Yeah. Like I really, in terms of, Shai versus him was like a fun one where I was like thinking who I wanted to put higher, but it's just that, okay, well, numbers wise and efficiency wise, Shai is just like, he kind of like understands himself a little bit better.
Like I said, it seems like a better like team player, right? Team. I'd rather play with that guy than this guy. You know what I mean?
And
I'd rather beat Ja Morant, but I'd rather play with the Shai guy.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. And like the thing is with Morant is that he might actually just like slip onto one of those time great list just because of how explosive he is as a player, because people do just like fall in love with that kind of game.
Yes.
Okay, I have one more if we want to go there, unless you want to take one.
Oh, go on.
So this one I thought you were going to bring up earlier.
I'll do one more at the end, but I'm going to keep mine spicy. I'm going to keep it at the end just to keep it. I know what people do. Here's the thing. My joke is, I could say I know what people like because I'm pretty well versed in my own. But the joke is I know what people don't like. So to hit that, so it's all right. We'll get that.
Okay.
Come on.
Okay.
Hit me with a name.
I was legitimately surprised when I was making this list. This guy was under 25, and I actually immediately didn't even consider him off the top of my head. And it's Luka Dončić. He's
I was actually going to do that. I was going to name my last name.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, I thought we were both going to hit on this one eventually because it's just obvious this guy is transcendent. This guy is obviously like top 10 player in the league right now. I will say he kind of suffers from a similar thing as Morant and Trae Young for that matter, where it's like they're a little bit chucky. Like that's what I do hate about watching Luka is that like, dude, you don't need to take as many 3-point shots as you take, but like to be 24, to be the primary distributor, like the main guy, the supposedly supposed to be the bus driver for the Mavericks team, and putting up 32, 8, and 8 is just crazy in terms of numbers. And also what I really what kind of like frustrated me first about Luka's game, but I've come to since appreciate more, is that he just has such strong body control that to me sometimes looks like a slightly shorter version of Jokic, where it's like he can move so slowly, but he just gets the right amount of separation that his game sometimes looks like it's a little bit slower than everybody else's out there. But he knows that when he plays to his own pace, he's more in control than other people are out there who are just trying to move at like 100 miles an hour. And he knows that if he just goes at 60 65 and he's actually just playing within his own range, he can actually be a lot more efficient than a lot of people out there. And so that's where he's super impressive to me. I will say another thing is, though, like, unfortunately, defensive wise, he's just not there. I think Shai is more engaged on defense. I think Tyrese Haliburton is more engaged on defense when I've watched him play. That's the thing with Luka, where it kind of feels like he's suffering from like a little bit of like, he's got a little bit of Harden in him, where he just seems like he doesn't always care on one end of the floor, which I take such issue with. And another thing is, like, another reason I probably didn't come around to Luka as fast as a lot of people is, like, I saw him get lit up by the Warriors, and I saw him not score. I saw, like, his flaws very clearly when he was 23 years old, when he played against the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals. And I just was like, okay, this guy makes a lot of errant passes. He doesn't actually, like, know how to score when he's, like, draped on by, like, a really great defender, like someone like Draymond. And so I was kind of like, I'm not really sold on this guy. And, yeah, I mean, since then, I mean, Luka's done nothing but continue to get better. But it's also like he does also just seem like the white Harden in a lot of ways, because he comes into every season like slightly out of shape. Like he just starts every season, he has to just like play himself into shape. And I get some of these guys care about more than just basketball. Like Jokic makes that abundantly clear, and apparently you can still win championships as the best player in the league by not completely caring about basketball from his perspective. But for certain people like Luka, you can't do that and expect to like be an all-time great. You need to, if you want to push it and like really solidify your place as an all-time top 100 player as a certainty, I wish he just kind of like got the whole act together completely. And also he suffers, like he takes so many characteristics from like the worst parts of other players. Like he's kind of floppy sometimes, and he kind of just complains to the refs like so often. Like of every single person on this list, I think maybe like him and Morant probably complain to refs the most. But I actually think when I watch Morant, it's like you're drawing the contact, like you're throwing your body into these players, so you have a right to be upset. With Luka, it's like, dude, you barely got scrapes. Just suck it up and just like try to move on to the next play.
Like the problem I have with Luka Dončić goes like this. So why I saved it to the end, because I thought it'd upset people, which is I do think he's overrated. And the reason why I say that is this. This is a player where if you ever talk to people who are semi-casual about basketball, they think he's like the best player in the NBA because they've just seen the highlights and they've heard the furore. And the joke is, this is why actually Jokic, the player, is the ultimate contrast. Because the joke is, Jokic is the best player in the NBA, and his game is way less sexy. The problem is, because if you think about it, Luka is actually like what every pleb wants to be. It's the guy where it's like, right, and he can shoot every shot, and he's clutch, and he has the Dame Lillard super long 3-point shooters, and no one can guard him. It's like all the ego shit people want. Because in the modern day, I get the feeling the fans of the NBA are the dickhead who used to just play NBA 2K with one player and just do the same move over and over again and score 60 points. It's like that's what they want the NBA to actually be. If you like that, then this guy's right in your wheelhouse. The problem is, he isn't even close to the best player in the NBA. He's a very good player, and I agree with you. He actually has a chance to, like, put it this way, he could be on that NBA 100 list in like 20 years from now. Yeah, of course, like his skill set's there. But the issue I have is, one, it's a bit like Damian Lillard. He has absolutely maxed his game out thus far in his career. Like he's taken every shot he ever wanted to take, Maui. He's never been a guy doing like what we're talking about. Like, well, maybe I take 3 less shots and I distribute. No, he's not doing that. Like he just takes the shots and tries to make them and has an ego game. So the problem is, I already know his skill set. It's really awesome offensively. I also know what you mean as well. The other thing, a bit like a lot of the European players he has, because if people don't get it, there's a reason why that move, the original move, is called the Euro step. The one thing Europeans mastered that American players still don't get for some reason is once you know the rule set of like you can take this many steps, the way you do it though, like that, it's a counterintuitive concept, but basically, if you go a little bit slower, it actually makes you better at doing the moves. I can actually give you an analogy from my own career. I often tell people, if you either do content in like YouTube videos where people might like fumble and think like, oh shit, where was that? And get lost. Or you do like desk work where you have to in the moment be coming up with something. People do this thing where if you second guess yourself that you fuck yourself. Like if you think in your mind for a second, oh, I got caught. It's thinking I got caught that'll make you shut the video down. Maybe I'll shut it. I haven't got any more points. What you do, I always say, is you just slow it down a little bit. If you slow it down 10%, no joke, because you're slowing it down, it actually feels like, it's coming out really slow, the words now. You feel like you've got all this time and space. It's like the game does slow down. That's what these guys do. Like, essentially what you're talking about, when Jokic and Luka do the penetration move, but they do like a Euro step, and they're not beating the guy from speed, they're just essentially really efficiently using the number of steps you can take to make some separation and then close to the basket, make a move. It looks like, why doesn't everyone do that? Because it's actually a cerebral decision is the point. It's not athletic. That's what's really confusing them. It's like a chess move. But if you do it, by the way, it is OP as fuck in the modern day of the NBA. Like, it's actually also why, if people want a quick sports reference, it's why if you ever watch the NFL, you'll actually think a lot of the quarterbacks must like being injured, because, dude, they'll hold the ball forever. They'll just be looking for an option, and they'll get wrecked by these sacks, but it's because it's the same concept. You might think, right, well, because there's people coming to attack me, I should throw the ball as soon as possible. No, because if I slow it down 10%, every time I actually get away with it, Maui, and the guy doesn't get there till 1 second later, I have 3 seconds extra to find someone open and just pass them the ball. That is OP as fuck. It's actually why it's okay in these scenarios to look a bit janky, because the actual, the efficiency and the efficacy of the moves is unbelievable. So I do think that is actually underrated, that aspect. That's the reason why essentially this guy can always get a shot off anytime. But I do think his defense is a massive knock. It's a massive knock. Because he's not stopping anyone scoring, by the way. He really is the motherfucker, right, my turn now. And then he's doing slap fighting, you know what I mean? Because here's the joke I have. You know when people put the slap fighting, because it's done by the people like the UFC, where the contest or whatever. In the UFC, I can still block. In the slap fight, I've just let you slap me. That's what modern day NBA has become. It's right, you take your 3. Now my turn. No, how about I just dodge your shot and then take mine? That's what I want to do. So I think Luka is mega. But my problem with this is, if I have to look at the best seasons, the last 2 he's had, he's probably the 5th best player of the NBA, if you know what I mean. But I do get the vibe from either his fans or from casuals. It has actually, the media has gone mad with this guy. They really do make claims like he's the best player in the NBA, bro.
Yeah. Yeah, the defense is where it's really, I mean, the guy that I relate him to the most is just Harden. It's he's got an incredible offensive array of ability, but it's just that one, he to me is very dislikable because he's kind of just foul baiting a lot of the time, or he doesn't foul bait as badly as Harden did in Harden's prime, but it's the amount of complaining, it makes it feel pathetic, he is trying to do it. Yeah. And the fact that they both were just turnstiles on defense is just so egregious. That's another, when I was watching him play the Warriors, I was like, dude, you're not doing anything. You're giving up free baskets. That's the Warriors dispatch it. The Warriors in that that run they had to win the championship a couple of years ago was just so, or a year ago was just so, that felt like one of the easiest series when I was watching it. I was like, this is this is a joke. This is your best guy. This is your champion. It just was this guy doesn't even play. It's why it doesn't feel like winning basketball sometimes. It is stats all can contribute to winning basketball, but just the way he would go about it, the amount of chuck shots I had to watch, where I was dude.
Oh, by the way, there's another thing.
Settling.
This has to be the player where I would even use him as the line. He's the player where it's it's so debatable if some of these threes actually are worth it for him, if you know what I mean. His numbers are right on the line where it's you're just about making it where it does check out, but you're not the fucking people we were talking about before. You're not some Damian Lillard guy who can really lace it at 39% every time. You can't do that, mate. And like I said, they're doing that when they do it from the logo shot. Luka actually is he's slightly overrated as a shooter in my opinion. Like I said, for me it's more I actually think his mind for the game is quite impressive offensively, the way he uses his team. That's all great. I do like his offensive mentality, but he doesn't play defense and he does chuck it too much. I agree with you. He's a chucker.
Yeah. I mean,
that's why it'll actually really show you. This season might be the perfect one for that in that sense, Maui, because when you've got Kyrie Irving, well, now you have no excuse to just take every fucking shot, do you? So now we're really going to see what is his game like when he's not maxing it out, essentially, because first of all, you've got to let him have some shots, and secondly, dude, he might even be a better ball handler than you. It's why actually, low-key, by the way, I think that move, In my opinion, both Kyrie Irving and Durant, as a quick tangent, just showed you that players have no understanding of basketball. These teams they went to, all you're doing is just making HLTV forum fucking teams here. Like, these teams don't make sense on paper. Like, the Kyrie Irving one, I think's crazy. It's like, so you've gone to a team where you're both mega ball dominant ball handlers and chuckers. Like, that's mental. And then the Kevin Durant one is like, yeah, it's a good teammate, but like, aren't three of you the same guy? You know what I mean? Like, I can't handle how they make these moves, mate. It's so wild to me.
Yeah, it's hard to find, like, I mean, complementary stars in the league. Like, also where that Kawhi Paul George team up thing was like, but you guys are both small forwards. Like, I get you guys could both like be incredible at it, but it also just felt really strange. It's like, in a weird way, if you wanted to put together the sickest, like, if you wanted a homogenous lineup in the NBA, you probably would want 5 Kawhi Leonards or 5 Paul Georges, but like also running 2 on at the same time who kind of have similar skill sets to me was like, oh, you guys are just like, you're kind of a copy of each other. And I don't know if that's necessarily scary. Like whenever they try to assemble like what they were calling like back in the day before 9/11, like the Twin Towers sort of lineups where you just have 2 really strong centers. It was like that wasn't, I don't know if that would like, it was okay. It was like, all right, like, but I don't think it ever really proved to have. Like,
here's the problem. I'll give you the analogy. It's a bit like in Counter-Strike. Whenever you put these teams together that have 2 godlike entry players, your brain goes, is game over. But it never quite works, does it? You know what I mean? They never do run roughshod over the whole league like you hope. By the way, along these lines, though, I'll give you a quick reference before we wrap it, because it'll tie together a lot of what we're talking about. The reason why I think the whole, like, everything you do should just be a 3-point shot from someone who has good stats, the reason why that can't be the winning metric for basketball is, how are you all going to tell me that is the metric, but then you're also all going to tell me you love Jimmy Butler? This guy never fucking shoots 3-pointers. Like, all he actually shows you, Maui, for real. I actually think he's an overrated player, but this is the reason why his game works, because he is like the antidote to all of the bullshit I've complained about in this episode. He is just going to not take too many shots, but in a playoff game where it's a big pressure game, he is going to take a load of mid-range shots right at exactly the point that's hardest to defend, because you either foul them and they go to the basket, or you give them a chance to pat. Like, that his game shows that mid-range will always exist in the NBA. It's just whether people focus on it or not, mate. Like, it will always, like you say, be a counter to this like small ball corner 3 metric. Like, that guy, he's not actually like a top 5 player in the NBA, guys. But in the NBA playoffs, he may as well be, because like no one else has this skill set nowadays.
Yeah. There's always value to be found in just something that's a little bit off meta.